What is happening out there, rotoscouts football fans? Pretty sure it's football, right? Football, basketball, baseball. Can't keep track. A lot going on. Busy Saturday of DFS action. Hopefully you guys got your lineups in for basketball. Just got mine in. Got some late swapping done. No Donovan Mitchell. That was a wild card coming down the stretch into lock. Ended up scratching right at the very end. We had some back and forth in the Discord, debating. One beat reporter had it one way, the other one had it the other way. One from Indy, one from Cleveland. Wasn't exactly helpful down the stretch there, but ended up with no Donovan Mitchell, which sucks because he was highly projected in a very short Cavs rotation. So I had to bail out on a few shares of him, get some lineups corrected, but we're pretty good. It's been a frantic day. Haven't finished my NFL research, my notes, my usual notes that I have. I'm through like half the games. So we're going to get about halfway through where I'll be like, bang, 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 targets this, the usual routine. And then we'll slow down a little bit. And we'll have to like look at some ones. But I'm going to try and get through this one in like 2 hours. I know we're starting at 7:30. I don't want to keep everybody here all night. I've got a long night ahead of me, and then I got to get up early tomorrow and get my lineups in before going off to the Bad Religion show tomorrow. So probably going to try and zoom through this one. Maybe we'll go a little bit more, not surface level, but maybe a little less in-depth, a little bit less far down the depth chart, talking about guys who haven't been targeted since week 3 and only play on special teams and so on and so forth. Usually it's everybody who's on the list. The other wild card is my laundry is about to arrive now, actually. The guy just texted. I'll be right back, gang. Entertain yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves. Little Linda Richmond. Right back. All right. Laundry is here. You guys got laundry in your buildings, your homes? What do you guys do for laundry? I send mine out. I just am not capable of carrying it the 3 blocks down the block to this laundromat over here and then actually doing it myself. Putting the stuff in the machine, sitting there for 2 hours. It's just not something I've ever been able to do. So I just set money on fire by sending my laundry out. Or if it's the right time of year, if I've stretched the clean clothes long enough, I can bring it home. Like if I go home for Thanksgiving, I'll be bringing like 80 pounds of laundry with me. Steven Leibowitz got some laundry in the house. Most homes these days do come with laundry. Apartment building, not so much. Especially when you're in like a not great apartment building. Small one. There's like 6 apartments in here. It's not the greatest building in the world. But yeah, laundry, even if I had a machine, I would certainly do it. I would actually do it a lot. I would just throw stuff in so I always had clean stuff and never really worry about it. As you guys see, I just basically wear t-shirts every day, so it's just like, my rotation of t-shirts is deep, but then I get to the end of it and I've got a giant pile of laundry rather than just doing a few every couple of days. Then you can keep your favorites in the rotation a little bit more. Works better. Life is better when you can do things like that efficiently rather than sending it out to be done and paying through the nose to do it, and then having them interrupt our show with deliveries. But anyway, let's get into this one, gang. It's an interesting slate. We've got some weather wild cards to deal with. All kinds of action all over the place. Let's take a look up and down some of the board. Just as a starting point, we didn't have a show yesterday. We didn't do the last first look show where we talk about the quarterbacks and the stacks and the rankings. So we got to do all of that, get kind of a feel for it. It's a decent place to start, the stacks board. FanDuel DK. Philly, obviously looking like a monster up at the top. Miami, no surprise there, but they're super expensive on the DK slate. Miami's a giant difference from site to site. KC. This is our weather game. It's supposed to be in the 20s and like 6 inches of snow during the game, the KC Denver game. This one might cool off a little bit, but it's not going to drop that far. There's nothing I can do that's going to stop Mahomes and Kelsey from pushing that stack up a decent amount. Like the spot for the Jags. Depends what you think of Trevor Lawrence. He's been up and down, success. Had some, but hasn't really had the monster. Some really good weapons in that offense, though. They read out pretty well against Pittsburgh. San Fran just on the back of some strong projections for the McCaff, Kittle, Ayuk group there. Kind of climbs up here. They are going to have Brock Purdy, apparently. Managed to take a concussion on Monday and clear the protocol by Saturday, which is impressive. Somebody sent out a good tweet. It was like, everybody knows if your position is quarterback, your brain heals quicker. Something like that. The Rams. I actually like the Rams. This was that game last I saw. What's the spread in that game now? Yeah, Dallas 6.5 point favorites. I get that they're at home in Dallas, but 6.5 point favorites over the Rams? I don't feel like the Rams have been that bad, and I don't feel like Dallas has been that good to justify that line. I just kind of like that as a betting opportunity. Not that we talk too much betting opportunities on this show, but that just seems like a spot to me. I think this game's going to play a little closer. I like the total. I like the offensive weapons on both sides. I like the opportunity for this game to shoot out a little bit. So that Dallas LA game is definitely on my radar. And I like where LA lands in terms of the stack rankings. Obviously a little bit of support there from Cooper Kupp, from Puka. But it's a good fantasy offense. They're not that expensive. They're dropping points per dollar on DK. A little bit more affordable on the FanDuel board. But a good like mid-board type team. New Orleans against Indy should definitely have some opportunities to throw the ball. Baltimore against Arizona could be another very big Lamar day. He projects like a monster in this one. Don't really care about his weapons when he can run the ball in, but I like the Mark Andrews combo. I like the Zay Flowers combo. So it's got some good pieces to work with. Grades out really well, and even better in a points per dollar sense, which is great because his skill players that go with him aren't all that expensive. So it's actually, as much as we like to run naked Lamar stacks, it's actually very affordable to build stacks with his skill players. Cincy going up against a tough San Francisco team, but the opportunity maybe if Burrow's feeling like throwing the ball deep a little bit, and he's obviously got some excellent weapons to work with. But San Francisco overall, a good defense that gets to the quarterback a pretty good amount. Burrow had that one great game, and after struggling with the calf injury, came back the following week, wasn't great, had a pretty limited game. I've got the stats down, but less than 200 yards, I think only one touchdown. So I don't expect that he's limited still, and he's had another week to heal. They were in the bye last week. So hopefully we get a fully healthy, engaged Burrow, and we get a good game there. That's another one where it's potential for some fantasy output on both sides, Cincinnati and San Francisco. No Debo for San Francisco in that one. Dallas on the other side of the LA game, and then Houston, number 1 on the board for point per dollar on DK from the 11 spot on the raw points board. Number 4 on the board on FanDuel point per dollar from the 11 spot. Really like that spot. Going up against Carolina, nothing to worry about really in terms of the defense. It's really about whether Carolina hangs in. But between the two rookie quarterbacks, I just really am enthusiastic about the Stroud side. Should have Tank Dell back. No Robert Woods this week, but that bodes well for Tank Dell shares. He's got Nico to work with. Devin Singletary took a step forward last week, and it's a dual-headed backfield there. But I like that spot. I think they're kind of interesting, especially in the points per dollar sense. I expect they'll have a decent amount unless they get crazy highly owned. Minnesota against Green Bay, perfectly fine. You're still dealing with the no Jefferson situation there, but they've been serviceable. Cousins has been good. The Jets don't really like at all against the Giants. They rate out okay points per dollar, 4th on the DK points per dollar. Thankfully for my purposes, only 12th on FanDuel. Don't need to get to them. Seattle going up against the still tough Cleveland defense I don't love. Atlanta against Tennessee. Considering, Ritter's been a little bit better, but they've been getting away with a lot on the ground. Tennessee basically stacks up against the run, funnels to the pass. There's opportunity for Atlanta to have a day, but I don't love that spot. Indy I don't love against New Orleans. Good defense in terms of the passing game. Maybe you get some Jonathan Taylor from the Indy side of things. The Giants with Tyrod again. I like the offense better when it's Tyrod than Danny Dimes, but they don't rate out well at all. Maybe you take some Saquon shares, maybe a couple shares of skill players, but not a real prime stacking opportunity. Same thing, Steelers, Packers. A lot of the meh teams, a lot of the obvious names kind of drop down. There's no real teams that really, really stand out down here for value to me. Arizona, a team that we've gotten to for value a decent number of the time early in the season. Number one, they haven't been playing as well as they were the first couple of weeks. Number two, going up against a really good Baltimore defense, with Baltimore looking like they're going to light them up offensively. I don't really like that spot this week for the Cards. So they drop down to the bottom of the board. Not that me liking it has anything to do with it. I don't like it because they're at the bottom of the board. 26th overall on FanDuel in both categories because they're still expensive over there. 17-4 for the stack on DK for the four-man group. 17th by point per dollar. They get a little bit better there, but that's nothing to go crazy for. Really down board, it's difficult this week. Cleveland not with the backup quarterback. Tennessee, just nothing really to like there. Mac Jones, nothing there. I think Washington, maybe you can get a little bit out of just because on the virtue of good skill players, a reasonably decent quarterback, but going up against the decent Philly defense. So I don't love that spot, and it's not like they grade out crazy good for point per dollar on FanDuel. A little better on DK. Carolina, same story, a little better on DK and point per dollar, but I don't really want to go to the Bryce Young side of that combo. I want to take my stand on the Stroud side, and then maybe I can take some shares of a couple skill players coming back the other way. Russ in the snow, the cold, going up against KC. That's not terrible. Don't really like that spot with struggling Russ. Kind of not great. Cortland Sutton, maybe a little bit of. Maybe some Jerry Jeudy shares, but not a ton to like there. So really, you can draw a pretty easy line like here. Like everybody Atlanta up is at least in the more playable zone. That's like your Atlanta up is like your yellow. And then I'd say like Dallas up is probably the ones I'm like more enthusiastic about. So like top 10, essentially, if you just go straight by rankings. And I think that's the same on both sites. And you get some good point per dollar options in there. 2, 5, 3, 7 on the point per dollar scale on DK. Obviously much better point per dollar on FanDuel. It's just how things go. If you're on DK, you can absolutely drop down to Houston if you want to. I wouldn't go to the Jets. Even against the Giants, like maybe it's Garrett Wilson day, maybe it's Breece Hall day, but I don't want to load up on stacks and have to rely and put a bunch of lineups in the hands of Zach Wilson. It just doesn't really work. So skill players probably from here, but really from here up are the priorities. Those are the teams that actually look like I want to have decent shares of. So no real crazy groundbreaking news there. The top 10 teams look good, guys. All right, end of show. This was a good one. See ya. We've got a little ways to go still. 13 games. 15 minutes into the show. Hey, by the way, somebody shouted out if anything breaks for the for NBA. Any late scratches, lineup changes, anything like that, because obviously I can only watch so much. And if I got to change lineups, that'd be good to know. I'm going to just take a quick peek, make sure we're looking okay. I think I had everything accounted for. This was the part that when I was thinking about today, I forgot to anticipate the need to be watching these lineups, keeping an eye on late swaps, keeping an eye on situational stuff for the projections. I think we're all right still. Jovic and Jaquez starting from Miami. Interesting pairing. I didn't have them at starters minutes, but I think we're all right with that. Everybody on that team basically was getting a pretty decent chunk of minutes in the final version of the projections. It was just like, all right, regardless of starting who's coming off the bench or whatever, we're just going to give you get minutes and you get minutes and so on. Let me see real quick. Bear with me, guys. Let me just see. I just want to see where I have... I should probably get a little bit more. We had to mention that. Why did I bring up the NBA? Hold on. Now I got to update those two projections. Damn it. Stick with me out there, gang. One day it will be you on the other side of this projection, and you'll be wanting it to get updated. All right. Both those guys are starting. All right. Add him. Yeah, Jovic could use some more. All right, let's go 6 and 4. Jaquez was on a limit the first 2 games. But let's just go with that. All right, they get a little bit more. 4.95. Jaquez. Didn't change. Why didn't that change? Oh, so we gave the minutes to the wrong guy. That's why it didn't change. One of you would have caught that if I'd let you in on what I'm doing. 14. All right. All right. Hopefully it won't matter that much. There's so much value on that NBA slate. It's ridiculous. Steven says, sorry, not sorry. Yeah, no, that's, like I said, one day it'll be you on the other side of the projection, and you'll want me to take the time to update it too, or, want whoever from Stochastic or wherever you're getting your projections from. So that's how I try and think about it. It's just, what would I want the person to be doing on the other side of this equation? So we've got some interesting spots in terms of the stack rankings. Really interesting board in Vegas. 44-point game with Arizona and Baltimore, but Baltimore favored by 10. Not exactly great news for DFS, and like I said, I don't love the Arizona side to hold their end up. Atlanta and Tennessee, only a 35-point total. 43.5, I like this one, and I like that Vegas sees Carolina hanging in. Only 3-point dogs at home. I don't think they necessarily hang in, but I like the Vegas is at least giving them a little credit for it. A lot of home dogs this week as well. 44.5 points in the Cincy-San Francisco game. That one feels a little bit obvious. Just 38 in Cleveland and Seattle in what seems like an ugly one. I think there is opportunity that Geno could have a good game and that passing attack could come through, or Kenny Walker could have a good game. But Cleveland's defense, even though they got kind of carved up last week by, what was it, Minshew? I think it was Minshew. Still pretty good, though. Ranks out third, 3.5 yards per rush attempt, 8th, 6 yards per pass attempt. So I don't love this game on either side. Cleveland, definitely not. That's the Dallas and the Rams game again. 45.5 with KC favored by 7 in that ugly, snowy, cold condition game in Denver. I don't necessarily love. I'll always get to some KC, but it's not going to be a crazy priority for me, and I would probably expect this total to come down slightly if the weather trends continue to be bad. Green Bay, maybe I'm a little gun shy because I got burnt anyway by Jordan Love the last time I went to it. Doesn't really project out great against Minnesota. They're 6th against the run, 20th against the pass. There is the idea that Jordan Love could succeed. Maybe a Jordan Love, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs kind of combination. Luke Musgrave, questionable last I looked coming into this one, but expected, was surprising to see him back in, I think he was a limited practice. But it seems like he's trending toward actually playing, which is a bonus for them, but I don't love that spot either. Houston I like a lot. Indy, maybe some Jonathan Taylor. New Orleans is good against the pass. Not great against the run. Not tragic either, but if I'm taking anything from Indy, I think it's Taylor. I do like the Jags side of this one. I like the idea that Pittsburgh maybe keeps it close. 41-point total, not exactly elevated, but tons of skill on this team to go to. Good for combining. Mahomes I skipped over, but we did the take on that one already. As LA Dallas again. And then Miami, the Miami side of the Miami-New England game, sure, I can get enthusiastic about that. 47-point total, I think, is the highest on the slate. But there's a really good chance. They're 9.5-point favorites. There's a really good chance they go out and light it up. It's not like they've taken their foot off the gas in those situations throughout the season yet. But it could be a not totally ideal DFS situation. I think this is one of the more likely spots to put up a fairly explosive score. But I think the players that you're going to want in that case are probably all going to get a little bit owned because of that. The New England side of that game, I want no part of, really. Maybe a few run back plays. Ramondre's done nothing for me all season every time I've rostered him. I don't love the receivers. I don't love the quarterback. New Orleans, a lot of skill plays. I think Derek Carr's a capable quarterback. He obviously projects well in the model. He's got Alvin Kamara to work with. He's got Olave and Michael Thomas. Rashid Shaheed is a good downfield receiver. Juwan Johnson should be coming back. Just in terms of raw weapons, that's one of the better groups of skill players on the entire slate. Regardless of what you think of the Saints, regardless of what they've done in terms of offense this year, in terms of actual production this year, that is one of the better groups of skill players overall on this entire slate. Indy, only 1 point dog, 43.5 point total. They're ranked in the teens defensively. It could be a spot for New Orleans to succeed a little here. My worry is that it turns into the Kamara day when I stack up a bunch of Carr and Olave and Carr and Thomas, and then they just end up giving him Alvin Kamara 30 touches and he has a monster. Not that I wouldn't have Kamara in a bunch of stacks with that group, but that is always my fear with New Orleans. If I get too invested in the passing game, they've got such a weapon here who also does work in the passing game that it just might go through him. No part of the Giants going up against a better than these numbers look Jets defense with their backup but better quarterback. Sure, that's a plus. Maybe a little Darren Waller, maybe a little bit of Saquon. Saquon's probably the most compelling piece of the Giants offense going up against a Jets D that, for everything I just said about, I think they're better than what these numbers look like. Still 4.4 yards per rush attempt for the season. Maybe that bodes well for Saquon. On the other side, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson as some one-off plays. But again, not really trusting Zach Wilson with a bunch of my lineups. Everything Philly. Love that spot. 43.5 point total. Favored by 6.5. But I think there's a decent chance that Washington hangs in at least into the, through the third quarter and gives them a little bit of a game. Everybody here projects really, really well. Jalen Hurts has significant upside for passing and rushing touchdowns. Love the Philly spot. I imagine they're going to be popular. I just don't care. Pittsburgh, don't really want much to do with. They do have a couple good receivers in Pickens and Johnson. Don't love the split backfield situation. Don't really like the quarterback that much. And they're without their star tight end, Pat Freiermuth. Like I said, I do think Kenny Walker could maybe do something. But Cleveland's D is pretty good on both sides of the ball, or both sides of the defensive equation. DK should be back this week. Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba took a little bit of a step forward. So Gino's got weapons to work with. It's just, do they overcome the Cleveland D? And it doesn't look like Vegas really thinks so at 38 points. This one we talked about. Both sides of the Cincy-San Francisco game are in play. 35-point total in this one again. Just really don't want much of Tennessee. Maybe some Derrick Henry. But Atlanta, pretty stout against the run and good against the pass. And then Washington, down the bottom of the board, I think is playable. Got to get to some of those, not elite teams. We can't just load up on like Rams, Miami, Philly. We can, but not going to get very leveraged that way. Start cutting some of these things down. So we talked about most of this. We'll get into some of the specifics. Ritter, last time out, 19-25, 250 yards, no touchdowns. Week before that, threw for 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, but threw 3 interceptions. 329 yards, a touchdown, but just 1 touchdown on 37 passing attempts the week before. Still kind of meh in terms of any advanced stats. Going up against the defense that's allowing 237 yards per game, 7.4 yards per pass attempt, but only 6 touchdowns through the air on the year. Blitzing 38.6% of the time. Not crazy pressure numbers. Not a ton of sacks. Atlanta's got a chance to keep them upright, but let them throw the ball a little bit. I forgot to mention it's Will Levi's. Is it Levi's or Levis? I've been calling him Levi's, like the jeans. It's probably Levis, but I don't care. So I don't really love the quarterback play on either side of this one. There's also word that, what's his face? Malik Willis might get some snaps at quarterback for Tennessee. So they might just be sharing that job with like Levis being the primary, and then Malik Willis coming in for plays where you might want the quarterback to be a little bit more mobile, call some option type plays. So I really don't like the Tennessee side outside of Derrick Henry. You've got good weapons for Tennessee. Oops. Wait a minute. What the hell is he was over here. Why wouldn't he have come over here? Where is he? Okay. I love when shit that's just like, this is probably why. Yep, that's my fault. I'm going to say I love when shit's supposed to just work doesn't work. That's my fault, though. I didn't have the thing copied all the way down. So, yeah, Henry is probably my priority from the Tennessee offense if I have to go to something Tennessee. And the good news is you don't really have to. He's had some good games. Had some clunkers. Coming off the bye, should be energized. Week 6, 12 carries, 97 yards and a touchdown. 2 of 2 through the air. Not getting quite as many targets as last year with the uptick in targets that he had. Week 5, he had 13 carries, 43 yards. Week 4, 22 carries, 122 yards and a touchdown. That was his bigger week so far this season. But you get that right Derrick Henry day where he's just a wrecking ball out there. And you're going to wish you had him. 3 touchdowns on the season, 4.3 yards per rush attempt. Tyjae Spears putting up 5.5 yards per rush attempt. 1 rushing touchdown on the season. But overall, not the most volume in the world. 24 snaps last time out, 4 carries for 15 yards. 1 of 1. Broke it for 48 yards in the passing game, but not a ton of volume going his way. Probably needs Derrick to go down for a while in front of him. Henry getting 16 carries a game, handful of targets, so essentially 19, 20 touches, which is right around superstar caliber volume. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, a lot less in terms of clear volume. They're basically dealing with a split right now that's was exacerbated last time out by the undisclosed Bijan Robinson sickness or whatever the hell it was. Saw some reports saying it was disciplinary that they passed off his sickness. Saw some reports saying he was actually sick. I don't know. Either way, he wasn't out there except for, what did he get, 1 carry late in the game? And then all the coach speak about not liking fantasy sports. Yeah, but you still want to coach your team to win the game, no? Whether fantasy sports or not. What's up, Josh? Josh Gillum's here. Says, what's up? Beantown's here. Do you think they'll heavily feature Henry possibly being on the block and a backup QB? Absolutely. Yeah, 2 very strong points there. The backup QBs just, feeds the idea of Henry getting extra touches. And again, also coming off the bye. And then the fact that they are showcasing him. Not that you need to showcase Derrick Henry. Everybody knows exactly what Derrick Henry is, including, current year form. But they are showcasing him for a trade. He's going to finish the season on a different team. A lot of buzz about Baltimore, a little bit of buzz about Dallas. Both of those teams make a ton of sense in my mind. But yeah, I think that's a good call, Beantown. There's also the idea that maybe it goes the other way and they have a commodity that they know they want to trade, so maybe they protect him a little bit and they don't give him as many snaps. That lingers in the back of my mind for a play that I'm not like over the moon to get to anyway. So there is the wild card that it goes the other way, but I do think that you're correct the way that you said it in that it would probably lead to additional volume and make it a little bit better of a play. But yeah, little at least 2-headed here, and then Cordarrelle got involved last week. Season high 26 snaps, 10 carries, 56 yards, ran 11 routes, but no targets. He probably fades back into the woodwork. He's averaging just 15% snaps for the season. Just a handful, 2.75 rushing attempts per game. Doing well with the touches that he's getting. has star caliber skills out there. Showed it off a little bit more over the last couple seasons. A lot more limited in terms of the touches this year behind both Algier and Bijan. Algier came out 33 snaps with the offense, 21 carries, 59 yards, 3 of 3 in the passing game for 53 more yards. He had 7 carries in the red zone last week. He was already taking significant touches away from Bijan. He was already getting significant carries in the red zone. So there's just that, as talented as Bijan is, he's not getting many opportunities to run the ball into the end zone. Buddy, chill. Got a long way to go. He's not getting many opportunities to run the ball into the end zone. Both of his touchdowns have come in the receiving game this year. And just the carries and the snaps are getting split, even when they're both healthy, kind of evenly. So I get a little concerned about rostering either one of the Atlanta backs. I think they're both moderately playable. They rank out. Where are the... I've got all these hidden columns. All these different pieces of information that we need for some things and not for other things. So Bijan ranks out RB9, and he does project fairly well. I mean, that's not a bad projection, but I might have to get in there and check out what we've got in terms of the touches right now, because that feels a little bit high to me. I love the talent. RB3 in terms of the point per dollar on DK, 7 on FanDuel. Derrick Henry on the other side, just in the teens, and then drops into the 20s in terms of points per dollar at 7,600, 8,000 across sites. I think if I'm rostering anybody, it's probably Derrick Henry out of the pool of running backs, seconded by Robinson, then Algier. That's probably the same problem. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In the Atlanta passing game, we've got great options in Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I like both of those two guys at their positions. London, 25 routes run last week, 54 snaps, 6 of 7 through the air for 54 yards. Didn't get in the end zone. The week before, he was 9 of 12 for just 9 of 12 on 45 routes run, 125 yards, but no touchdown. 2 touchdowns all year. He came in weeks 2 and 4, just the one 100-yard game. But significant upside. If the quarterback can get him the ball, there's plenty of potential there. Projects out a little bit better on the back of some catches on the DK slate than he does on FanDuel. Overall, drawing 7 targets a game. A 9.9 yard ADOT. Pitts operating a little bit more downfield. Pitts is essentially, their wide receiver too, just plays the tight end position. But just an excellent option. 4 targets in the red zone for him, 11 targets in the red zone for Drake London so far, and then Jonnu Smith has 5 targets in the red zone. He continues to be involved. He continues to be out there for snaps, basically out there for half the snaps last week, 60% on average. He's running routes on half the snaps he's out there for. He's targeted on, call it, it's 18%. I was going to say call it 20%, but let's call it 18%. Call it what it is. 34 snaps last week, ran 18 routes, targeted 3 times, caught all 3 of them for 27 yards. Had a touchdown the week before. He's had a red zone target in each of the last 2 games. He's a not uninvolved part of the offense as a cheap alternative at tight end. 3,500 on the DK slate. $35 on the DK slate for Jonnu. Doesn't project out crazy good, but 14th on the tight end board isn't terrible. 20th by point per dollar, not great. I was expecting him to be a little bit more highly ranked for point per dollar as I was teeing that up, but that obviously didn't work out. 15th on the FanDuel slate point per dollar, 13th by projection. But the other guys in this offense, Van Jefferson, Mac Hollins, Kadrell Hodge, kind of limited. Nobody projects out great. Jefferson just 1 of 2 last week on 17 routes run, 31 snaps. Mac Hollins ran 23 snaps, 0 targets. Untargeted on 5 routes run. He was 3 of 4, but only ran 10 routes the week before, 41 yards. No touchdowns all year. A high of 60 yards in week 2. Kadrell Hodge, 12 snaps last time, 5 routes run, 1 of 1 for 19 yards, 1 target in each of the last 3 games. Season high was 2 targets in week 4. These are not high volume guys. Scotty Miller, targets the last 3 games have been 2, 1, 1. He caught all 4 of them. Had 46 yards on one catch last week. Even that, though, it's just not going to pay off, even at the dead minimum or thereabouts. He's just not involved enough. So you get your 2-3 points. It's not going to be enough. On the Tennessee side, just by virtue of who's going to be throwing them the ball, I don't really love this situation. If I'm taking anybody out of that passing attack, it's DeAndre Hopkins. That feels kind of obvious. 40 snaps last week, went just 1 of 5 on 27 routes run, only 20 yards. Caught 8 of 11 the week before, 140 yards. It's a little bit more of a D-Hop kind of a game. Chigakonkwo hasn't done much of anything all year. 3 targets, 9 targets, 4 targets each of the last 3 weeks. Caught 3, 5, and 2 of them. Has not cracked 40 yards in any week this season. 0 touchdowns on the season. Snaps and routes. Decent number of targets. But I like the tight ends on the other side. I like Jonnu Smith better than I like Chigakonkwo. Put it that way. Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Ikini. Burks probably back. I expected back, I believe. First week back since week 3. In weeks 1 and 2, he saw a decent amount of volume in terms of routes run and snaps. 54 snaps, 37 routes week 1, 40 snaps, 17 routes week 2. But just drew 3 targets week 1, 4 targets week 2, 18 yards on 2 catches, 76 yards on 3 catches. They're clear number 2 wide receiver, easy to go to in normal circumstances, but with these quarterbacks, I don't really love anything about the passing game down board. Nick Westbrook, we talked about. Chris Moore, 16 snaps, 1 of 1 for 6 yards. He's had 3 40-yard games this year in weeks 2, 3, and 4. No touchdowns on the season. His targets have been 1, 1, 3, 3, 0, and 1. Running ahead a few routes every game, but they're really not looking his direction. Kyle Phillips was targeted twice last time out. 14 routes run on 21 snaps. But with Burks coming back, I can't imagine there's much for these guys, for the downboard guys. Forgot you guys can't see the notes I'm looking at. So maybe a little. Certainly, for as much as you're going to Atlanta, these 3 guys, I think, are involved in a 1A, and then way down the board type of a sense. But I don't really love anybody else in this passing game. Baltimore, Arizona. Plenty of love for Lamar. Like I said, you can absolutely roll with Lamar naked shares again. You can absolutely stack him up with his passing attack. I don't love the running backs on the Baltimore side. Between Gus Edwards and Hill. There's a reasonable chance that either one of them has a decent enough day. I mean, they're going up against a defense that's allowing 4.4 yards per rush attempt. That ranks 22nd. They're also going up against a defense that allows 7.5 yards per pass attempt, which ranks 30th. That bodes really well for Lamar Jackson, who went 357 yards and 3 touchdowns last time out, plus had 9 carries for 36 yards and another touchdown, so a 4-touchdown game in that monster. I regretted immediately writing him up in the below portion of the above below column last week. I can guarantee you he's not going to appear there again this week. Pretty sure we're actually ahead of the industry on Lamar this week. Not that I went in and did anything to it to make sure of that after that embarrassing situation last week. But yeah, I was not with as much of the field as on Lamar last time out as I would have liked to have been. On the Arizona side, you get Dobbs, doesn't project well. QB 20, 18th by value, 20 and 21st on FanDuel. Going up against the defense that's allowed 4 passing touchdowns all season, 176 yards a game. They blitz 30% of the time, get to the QB 21.6% of the time, 14 sacks, basically an interception a game. I really don't see much need to go to Josh Dobbs here. Over the last few, he's really cooled off. Last time out, 146 yards, no scores, no interceptions, but no scores, 19 of 33 through the air. Week before that, 21 of 41, 235 yards, no touchdown, and interception. Carried the ball 7 times in each of the last 2 games, but hasn't really done anything with it. I just don't want to tangle with this Ravens defense with a relatively limited quarterback. I was more into the Dobbs plays earlier in the year. Call me fickle when he was playing well. Overall, 31st in yards per pass attempt at 5.9 yards per pass attempt. When you're 31st out of 32 teams, that's not great. And other similar stats that have them at best ranked in the middle. So no need to go to him against Baltimore. Lamar, 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Yes, please. Sign me up. 7.9 intended air yards per pass attempt. 230 yards a game. He's thrown for 8 touchdowns. The passing touchdowns going into last week at just 5 in 6 games were a little bit more limited. It was not concerning, but it was like, oh, that's noteworthy. He had 3 games, if I remember my notes from last week correctly, with 0 passing touchdowns. And only one of those was in a game where he ran the ball in 2 times. So it was a little bit concerning, but then he went out and threw 3 touchdowns and ran 1 in last week. He's got 5 rush touchdowns on the season, putting up 5.3 yards per rush attempt on basically 10 attempts per game, 363 yards, probably going over 1,000 for the season. Just an absolute dominant rusher at the quarterback position. No reason not to love Lamar here. QB2 on DK by points, 6 by point per dollar, 2 and 1 on the FanDuel slate. And Mario Mercado, team leader in touches last week. Keontae Ingram dropped completely off the depth chart, ended up just playing 9 snaps, all with special teams. That was after the week before he had 26 snaps, 10 carries, 40 yards. This is all with James Conner out. So it seems like the Damian Williams barely touched the ball, a handful of carries. But it seems like the depth chart now goes to Mercado, Damian Williams, and then Keontae Ingram is just a special teamer. Maybe a third down running back. But if you're going to the Arizona side for some sick reason on the ground, I think it's Amari DeMercado. 13 carries, 58 snaps. 13 carries, 58 yards. 4 of 5 in the passing game for 17 more yards. I don't love the option. I don't want to play him against the team giving up 95 yards a game on the ground and a quarter of a touchdown basically per game. There are better spots for running backs this week. 4 yards per rush attempt on the season. He's got 1 rushing touchdown. Hasn't played a ton. 39% of the snaps on average. 80% of the snaps last week. 2.9 yards before. 1.2 yards after contact. Hasn't been targeted in the red zone in the passing game. There's really nothing to see on the ground for Arizona. For Baltimore, Gus Edwards is like borderline playable. Probably better than borderline playable. Fuck is he? His carries, the volume's there. I mean, the last 4 games, his carries have been 15, 12, 16, and 14. Last time out, 64 yards and a touchdown. 1 of 1 in the passing game on 9 routes run, but he broke that for 80 yards. So there's talent there. There's clear talent. There's upside. Justice Hill just 4 carries and 27 snaps last week, but did put up 46 yards. 1 of 1 in the passing game for 2 more yards. Not uninvolved, but definitely has kind of taken a back seat in terms of the touches. The snaps are still about 50-50. But the touches are dramatically different. So I think if you're going to a back from that game, it's from that team, it's probably Edwards. But it's a very low priority running back situation. 24th by projection, 27th point per dollar on DK, 20th and 25th on FanDuel. I think our focus for skill players is probably through the air. If you're going to the Arizona stack, you've got Marquise Brown as the nominal number 1. He's not really catching a ton. 3 of 7 last week for 49 yards. 4 of 11 the week before that for 34 yards. 4 of 10 for 33. 4 of 10 on 33 routes the week before that. The targets are there. 10, 10, and 11, and then just 7 last week. But I mean, there's plenty of opportunities, just not catching enough of his passes. Rondale Moore, not so much. 2 of 4 last time out for 2 yards on 30 routes run, 42 snaps. 4 of 7 the week before that on 35 routes. Hasn't been over 35 yards all year. 0 touchdowns all year. Not a great season so far from Rondale Moore. Lands 44th by projection, but hilariously 4th by point per dollar on DK because he costs $3,400. When you can pay this price, even against a good defense, for a guy who probably will be targeted a few times, it's not the worst thing in the world from a points per dollar perspective. But I really don't expect that play to succeed. On this one, I would kind of lean more toward he's WR44 rather than just focusing on the point per dollar. But if you're in a pinch, if you really need to save money at wide receiver, it's not a totally awful option. Michael Wilson had that one good game. That was, at this point, all the way back in week 4. 2 touchdowns that week. Came back after that one, total clunker. I think it was like 18 yards. Last game, 3 of 5 on 35 routes run, 52 snaps. He's getting some looks. He's getting some opportunities to take snaps, to run routes. The week before that, 3 of 4 for 62 yards. I think he's a capable enough option, but this is realistic. Just a downboard receiver for the wrong price. 36 doesn't give him as much value as his teammate. It's amazing the difference. 36 for a 7.2 versus 34 for an 8.4. 1.2 points makes that much of a difference for $200 in point per dollar. Neither one of them looks good in any sense on FanDuel. Andrews, big yes. Zay Flowers, big yes. Both of those guys are high priority receivers in any Lamar Jackson stack. You can play Jackson on his own, like I said. Definitely have the upside that he could throw for 250 yards but no touchdown and run 2 in again. Zay last time out, 4 of 6 for 75 yards on 39 snaps, 32 routes run. 6 of 8 the week before that for 50 and a touchdown. The primary receiver, the rookie's looking pretty good. Old man Odell still out there. Target high last time out, 7 targets. Ran 22 routes on 31 snaps, 49 yards, no touchdown, no touchdowns all year. Had 2 missed weeks, a little bit limited. Not the Odell Beckham of old who made the amazing highlight circus catches, but there's an Odell week lurking here. It just, call it feel, call it intuition, call it whatever you want. There's an Odell 2 touchdown week lurking here somewhere. Not saying it's going to be this week. Not saying you want to chase it. I'm just saying from a football sense, right? Not saying this is not a reason to go roster Odell Beckham for DFS. He's playable. He's wide receiver 48, 33 by value, 47, 49. Not a good option. But there is, mark my words, before the season's over, there's a big Odell day coming. And if I'm wrong, don't remember it. Nelson Aguilar, Rashad Bateman, kind of just downboard dart throw type options. Bateman's out there running a handful of routes, mid-teens, 13, 19, 18, getting 3 targets each week. Last 3 weeks, 1 catch, 2 catches for 8, 15, and 36 yards. That's Bateman. Aguilar runs a few more routes, targeted a few more times, 5, 3, 1, caught 4, 2, and 1, yardage of 64, 40, and 12 in the last 3. Had a touchdown catch in week 7. That was his second one of the year. I prefer Aguilar, I think, to Rashad Bateman. I don't really like either option. Bateman does project out a little bit better in the model. They're both, reasonable downfield options. 11.1 yard ADOT for Bateman, 13.1 for Aguilar. Only one of them makes you feel smart when you played him, though, if he manages to catch the ball. And really dumb if he doesn't catch the ball and he's got like 3 drops on the day, because there's literally a meme about him dropping babies that are thrown out of buildings that are on fire. So, that's the Aguilar play. I slightly prefer him to Bateman, though, just because they're looking his way a little bit more lately, and he's got a little bit of a touchdown upside. Mark Andrews is the premium option in that offense in terms of the skill players. Last time out, 63 yards, 2 touchdowns in Lamar's big week, 4 of 6 through the year. That was his second 2-touchdown game of the season. He's got 5 total. His targets the last 3 games, 10, 6, and 6. Plenty of opportunity for Mark Andrews to shine again against a Arizona defense that is not going to be able to contain him or really anything in this passing game. So big yes, pretty sizable yes. A smattering of each of these guys with 1, 2, 3 probably if I'm ranking them. Nobody down here. And then on this side, it's really just, a couple dart throws maybe around the 3 primaries. I didn't even go into the Pascals and Dortches and so on of the world. They're just not really worth talking about. Trey McBride actually is worth talking about, though. Why isn't he on that board? That's odd. Am I not seeing him? Why would he not be here? He's projected. You know what? When I copied it, I probably had just updated, and it probably took him out of the filter. Regardless, so Trey McBride is kind of interesting. Again, it's all if you're going to Arizona, but as like a cheapish, I don't know what his price is off the top of my head, but I think he's fairly cheap. As a tight end option, he's not bad because Zach Ertz is out, and he's clearly got talent. He was seeing a little bit of an uptick already in targets and opportunity anyway. Last time out, 32 snaps, 6 targets, caught 3 of them for 29 yards on 20 routes run. Week before that, 62 yards on 20 routes run, 43 snaps, 4 of 5 through the air, and that was with Ertz playing. So Ertz now on the IR. It's the Trey McBride show. It's just not the right week for it against Baltimore. Keep this thing going. We got a good one to talk about here. I referred to it a few times off the top, but Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy miraculously making it back from a concussion or a non-concussion. Ignore that he's not ranked here. I didn't get an opportunity to do all the player rankings, but I did project him. So he's in the projections that are up on the site. I'll re-rank everything tonight. Yeah, it's an opportunity for Purdy to shine once again. As I've said multiple times, and it was a little bit unfair last week to judge him by last week because he took the concussion and looked significantly worse after taking the concussion. But I'm not completely sold on Brock Purdy. I continue to not be completely sold on Brock Purdy. I'm just sold on the idea that he plays with some of the best players in the NFL on his team. So he's got great weapons, so he doesn't need to be that good. It's just he's something of a limiting factor on top of the stack. Not in any real sense. 238 yards a game, 11 touchdown passes. A lot of help on the touchdown passes, I think, is kind of my point, right? He succeeds because of the skill players, but that doesn't matter, right? As long as you get the fantasy points either way. So it doesn't really matter. 8 intended air yards per attempt, completing 5.2 air yards per attempt. 8.6 yards per pass attempt is dynamite. 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. He's thrown the ball 26 times in the red zone. Joe Burrow's also thrown the ball 26 times in the red zone. I'm going to be the last man on that Purdy bandwagon, I'm telling you, but he's done well, and I think this is a good spot overall. I want to be on both sides of this game. I want to be invested in the San Francisco skill players, so therefore I do think that I can get to some Brock Purdy stacks. Going up against the defense that blitzes 17% of the time, draws pressure 21.7%. They get to the quarterback a reasonable amount. 20 sacks isn't bad. 8 interceptions is roughly 1 a game, a little bit better. 11 interceptions on the other side for San Francisco's defense, 22 sacks. Only 18.6% pressure, despite a 27.5% blitz rate. Maybe a little bit of opportunity for Burrow to stand tall, not run for his life, not have to strain the hopefully now fully healed calf muscle. But like I mentioned, he had the big game, 36 of 46 for 317 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. That was his best one of the season by a pretty wide margin after he was dealing with the calf. But then he came back next game, 24 of 35, 185 yards, did throw 2 touchdowns, but an interception. Less than 200 yards on 35 pass attempts for Joe Burrow is not encouraging. So I don't love that. I don't love the matchup against San Francisco's defense. It's also going to be something of a plotting game. Both of these teams fairly slow paced. There was a good note that I read about well, I can't find it. I probably didn't copy it. Something Niners are allowing some deep balls over the last X weeks. I forget what it was. But just maybe something to keep in mind with Burrow with his excellent downfield weapons. On the season, Burrow's thrown 7 TDs, 4 interceptions on the year, just 5.3 yards per pass attempt because he's been so limited, 6.1 intended air yards and only 2.9 air yards per attempt overall. But he really hasn't outside of that one game had the opportunity to really go out there and be Joe Burrow. I'll have Burrow shares. I'll definitely want to get invested in Burrow plus twos with any of these three guys. Maybe a little bit of Irv Smith around the edges. Maybe some Trenton Irwin, just total dart throws in that stack. But I like the depth in the receiving core, and I'll be going there. The one I'm curious about is Joe Mixon. Doesn't really project great for me. Going up against a defense that's allowing 3.9 yards per rush attempt on the season, ranks 15th, squarely in the middle of the league. Mixon hasn't been dynamite this year. He's been all right. But their 3.9 yards per rush attempt, it only amounts to less than 80 yards a game and 0.43 rushing touchdowns. So, like, yeah, they're allowing some yards in a per attempt sense, but it doesn't seem like that many teams are running that much against them, considering that they're allowing just 80 yards a game and fewer than than half a touchdown a game. I just don't think it's a good spot for a Joe Mixon that's only putting up 3.8 yards per rush attempt, 61 a game on 16 carries, only has one touchdown on the season. He's getting 3.5 targets a game. He's caught 2.5 of those. No receiving touchdowns on the year. 3 red zone targets. I think the salad days may be past for Joe Mixon at this point. I still like the player as he gets cheaper. Maybe we can go to him a little bit. But 19th, 22nd on DK, 19th, 22nd on FanDuel. Doesn't pop for me. I wouldn't take him out of a running back pool if I end up with a handful of shares of him. I'm perfectly fine with it. But non-priority. Christian McCaffrey, major priority. RB1 on both sites. 5 by DK value, 4 by FanDuel value. Christian McCaffrey, if you're not aware, has at least 1 touchdown in every single game they've played this year. Multiple TDs in just 2 of the 7 games, but at least 1 in every game, and he does everything in both the ground game and the passing game. 15 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown, 3 of 3 for another 51 yards and a touchdown last time out. He is a fantasy stick of dynamite if you can afford him. 9,200 on DK, 10-2 on FanDuel, but still rates top 5 on both sites for point per dollar. That's how good Christian McCaffrey is. He's got essentially a quarterback projection. So if you want to think of it in terms of that, he's not the most expensive in quarterback salary. Or is he? I shouldn't say that. Where's McCaffrey salary-wise? Yeah, he's the second most expensive player on the DK slate. So he is more expensive than your quarterbacks, which makes it good that he projects like one. All 3 of these guys do. 3 skilled players that are priced better than quarterbacks, but all project like quarterbacks. So that's perfectly fine. And it looks like he's the most expensive player on FanDuel as well by a pretty wide margin. To be that expensive and still project out that strongly positionally for point per dollar means you're pretty damn good. I don't think we broke any new ground with Christian McCaffrey is good as a news story. So it's a big, big yes for McCaff. Eli Mitchell, I don't think we're getting any kind of clear volume out of. 7 snaps, just 1 carry last week. 2 carries, 0 targets the week before on 7 snaps. Jordan Mason relegated to the special teams unit last week with Mitchell coming back. 11 snaps all on special teams. Kyle Juszczyk, 22 snaps last week, 0 targets, ran 11 routes. Week before that, 1 of 1 for 9 yards. Week 5, 4 of 4, 26 yards, and a touchdown. That's probably the rough ceiling for Kyle Juszczyk plays. I like Kyle Juszczyk a little bit on showdown slates. Even as a total dart throw on a main slate, it's pretty thin. Jamar Chase, a number 1 primo type receiver. 6 of 13 for 80 yards last time out. So 80 of the 185 yards that Burrow threw for in that game went to Jamar Chase. The monster game, they just connected over and over again. He was 15 of 19 in that game for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. T. Higgins didn't play in week 5. Back in week 6, just 2 of 4 for 20 yards on 24 routes run, 28 snaps. Probably an uptick to more normalized volume coming this week. Coming off the bye, plenty of opportunity. Excuse me, coming up to plenty of opportunity to get healthy. Tyler Boyd, 7 of 7 last time out, 38 yards and a touchdown. Week before that, 39 yards on 6 catches, 7 targets. He's got 1 touchdown all season, but he's running routes. He's targeted consistently. The last 3 weeks, he's seen 7 targets each week. 8 targets in week 2, 9 targets in week 3. Running 30-plus routes each week, 40-plus routes 3 of those 6 weeks. Boyd is a key part of this offense. He's a guy that people don't tend to go to that much. He doesn't project out as good as well as T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. Obviously, he's the third banana in the offense, but he's priced fairly. 4,600 on DK makes him a perfectly viable value dart. 6,000 on FanDuel. Well, technically, it's a better point per dollar over on FanDuel for the 6,000, so I guess he's in play. The point is just, from a football sense, from a targets sense, from a volume sense, he is somebody that always makes sense, and among the better options from the group of third receiver, slot receiver type guys that aren't your premium guys. So I like Tyler Boyd. I'm definitely going to mix him into some of my Cincinnati stacks. When we get to talking about which guys from this offense do I want on their own or as run back plays against San Francisco, that becomes more Jamar, T. Higgins, but I'll take some Boyd shares in that case, especially as a run back play against San Francisco. A little bit less so on his own, just off in some other lineup. I'd rather have a guy with more individualized upside in that case, but as a run back play against San Francisco, I don't mind him. Irv Smith caught 1 of his 2 targets last time out, ran 23 routes, only targeted twice, caught it for 5 yards. Caught 1 of them for 5 yards, rather. 0 targets the week before that on 28 routes run, 48 snaps. Kind of an afterthought at this point. Trenton Irwin ran 12 routes on 23 snaps, 0 targets last time out. And then Andrea Sivas, guy was chasing a little bit earlier in the season, finally got his first touchdown, 1 of 1 for 3 yards, and scored a touchdown last time. I can't imagine he's overly involved, even for 3,000. For a sub 1 projection, we're probably not going there. No Debo on the San Francisco side. Love some Brandon Ayuk. Love some George Kittle. Some Juwan Jennings. This is what's driving my interest in Brock Purdy shares. And it's primarily these 2 guys. Tight end 4, 7 by value. Tight end 4, 3 by value on the FanDuel slate. 13 and 22 on FanDuel for Brandon Ayuk. Unfortunate for DK. He cost 7,000 over there, which relegates him to WR 53 by point per dollar. 16th by raw point projection, though. So if you've got the 7,000, you can absolutely get some Brandon Ayuk. As I was saying, if you've got the 7,000, the quote from the State, the Barry and Levon sketch, we had the $240. We just had to get the pudding. $240 are worth the pudding. There's maybe one person that knows what I'm talking about. I told you guys I went to that show last week. It was a great time. Me and the boys had a great steak dinner. A bunch of drinks at dinner. Show was good. I'm really curious. I don't know if anybody's youngish, in your 20s out there and just recently checked out the old DVD sets or, obviously on streaming or whatever of The State, MTV's The State, the old sketch comedy show. But I came out of that show I loved it because I knew all those sketches, right? It's seeing one of my favorite bands playing their hits, right? I'm super curious about how it came off for people who had no idea who those guys were. Seeing that show the first time, I'm not sure how the comedy holds up. Everybody in the audience was a big fan, though. You could tell, everybody knew exactly what was coming, where the laughs were and all. So it made for an interesting show. Yeah, if anybody out there is just checking out The State for the first time, or if you're looking for something really funny, check out The State. You'll recognize a lot of the people. They've been in tons of things. Michael Ian Black, Thomas Lennon you'll definitely recognize. Joe Latrulio you'll recognize. Ken Marino you'll definitely recognize. Dennis says 20-year-olds don't care for comedy. Also true. Also true. Yes, they're more into tragedy these days, unfortunately. And some idiotic stances on some really important things that we are not going to get into on this show. It's a weird world out there right now. We're here talking about fantasy football and ignoring World War III breaking out, all right? Just leave me alone. Let me do it. What do we leave out of this thing here? So we're talking about San Francisco. Ayuk, the price. That was where we were. The price on Ayuk sucks on DK, but if you've got the $7,000, you can definitely get to Ayuk. You make it back up by the fact that George Kittle's only 54, ranks out tight end 7. I love the upside. He projects out as tight end 4 by raw projections. Like him quite a bit on both sites. And obviously a premium target for Brock Purdy. 5 of 7 last time out, 78 yards on 51 snaps. Just 1 of 2 for 1 yard and a weird one in week 6. Had 3 touchdown catches in week 5. That's your upside George Kittle day. I forget if I read off Ayuk or not. Had the just the 2 touchdowns from week 1 so far for Ayuk, but consistently highly targeted. 6 targets last week on 57 routes, 10 targets the week before, 76 yards on 24 routes, 7 targets the week before that, 20 routes run, 58 yards. 6 of 6 for 148 yards the week in week 4. With Debo out, anything that doesn't go McCaffrey's direction or Kittle's direction most likely is going toward Ayuk. But Juwan Jennings, 9 targets last week. Caught 5 of them, 54 yards, ran 39 snaps with the offense. Was the primary beneficiary with Debo out. The week before that, he was just 2 of 4 for on 29 snaps. So picked up 10 snaps with Debo out and 5 targets. That's not insignificant. For 3,800, he ranks out as 56.51 on DK, 46.50 on FanDuel. A dart throw, a guy who's a reasonable enough idea. If he gets 5 targets, might get 1 in the end zone, might put up a decent little yardage total for the money. Not a high priority receiver, but playable. Ray, 19 snaps with the offense last week, 38 snaps with the offense the week before, so those guys kind of flipped. He was targeted once, twice, and 3 times over the last 3 weeks. Caught 1, and 2 of them. Peaked at 20 yards. It's also a return man, so you do get a little bit of additional upside there, but it's a really limited dart throw. Nobody downboard. Look at us just flying along. Game 4. Limited game. Talked about it up top. Don't really like this one. Don't like PJ Walker Day. I don't like banged up Jerome Ford making his way back on a Friday practice with a high ankle sprain, limiting the shares that'll go to Kareem Hunt, making it a completely nebulous backfield that nobody's going to have any idea to go with, what to go to, and it'll probably just end up being something stupid, like Pierre Strong Day. But yeah, I like Ford as a running back. I think he's all right in terms of the volume that he was getting, in terms of some of the talent, but playing with an ankle sprain, I don't love the option there. Going up against the Seattle defense that's already allowing just 3.5 yards per rush attempt, ranks 3rd. Both these teams limit the run. 3.7, 3.5. I mean, look at the defenses here. Both of these defenses are good. 38-point total might be high, especially with PJ Walker in there. Amari Cooper not having a great year. Part of that probably can be blamed on the quarterback play. Missed, week 1? Last time out, caught just 2 of 8 targets, 22 yards. Caught 4 of 8 for 108 the game before. Been over 100 yards just twice all season. 1 touchdown all season. His targets the last 5 games, 8, 6, a bye week, 8 and 8. I guess I should have said the last 5 weeks, not the last 5 games. But 8, 6, 8 and 8. So there's plenty of volume. Amari Cooper, for being Amari Cooper, doesn't exactly cost a ton. Njoku, Elijah Moore. It's a really limited set of players after Cooper, especially when we're taking the backside of the equation for the most part. Njoku's an okay tight end. I don't like the downboard receivers really at all. So really anything I go to here is going to be from the Seattle side primarily. And I've been actively avoiding the Cleveland defense for the better outside of last week, basically all season. So I don't really know that I want to attack that much Seattle here. For what it's worth, they're allowing 149 yards through the air per game, 6 touchdowns on the season through the air. Getting the quarterback, pressuring him just 15% of the time, which is good news for Geno, but they've gotten to the quarterback 20 times. Only 3 picks on the season. Geno's throwing for 231 yards a game. He's thrown 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Not great output. He hasn't had a big game yet. He's had 3 games that were 2 over 300 yards, and one was, I want to say, 296 yards, if I'm remembering correctly. So he's put up some yardage, but the touchdowns haven't really been there. For Walker, just 2 games played, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 185 yards on 33 attempts a game. Hasn't really run the ball to speak of. He's thrown the ball 5 times in the red zone. In 2 games, they've dropped the ball 4 times on the poor kid. That's just unfair. But really not a lot to like in terms of QB 25-17, 23-23, 18-25, 19-14 on Geno's side. Nothing really to like stacks-wise. The running back situation, like I was just saying, Jerome Ford made it back to practice. He was limited in practice on Friday. Still currently questionable, but I put him back into the projections. I had him out, put him back in. I think that just screws things up where we were maybe going to be able to get to some Kareem Hunt. And this actually probably needs to come down a little. I didn't have time to update the rankings like I was saying before. Hunt didn't look killer. He looked okay. He looked playable. But I think if this comes down a little bit, he'll look just basically, maybe a couple of darts, but not a lot. Ford, I just don't want to go to at all, considering he's playing hurt and going up against good rush D. Kenny Walker is the wild card here. Even against a good rush defense, Kenny Walker could have a good day. He's got more than enough talent. He also didn't practice through part of the week. Full practice on Friday, no injury designation, but took 2 days off midweek from practice. I'm not worried about it, but just another thing to throw on the fire with, going up against a good defense, blah, blah, blah. Plenty of volume, 26 carries for 105 yards, 2 of 3 through the air for 6 more yards last time out. 19 carries the week before that for 62 and a touchdown, plus 3 catches for 27 yards. They go to him through the air. They go to him on the ground. He's a significant part of the offense. Charbonnet, 17 snaps, 2 carries for 5 yards his last game. 2 of 2 for 14 more in the passing game. Not a ton to see there unless he's getting any kind of volume. In the pass game, you can see where Cooper ranks 28th by raw points, 60th by point per dollar, 29th and 31st on FanDuel. I read the Cooper notes. The Njoku notes, though. 9 targets last time out. Season high. Caught 5 of them for 54 yards. That was his only time all year over 50 yards. He also has 0 touchdowns all year. Njoku's not been great. A guy that I think we keep expecting fantasy performances from and just never really getting him. Tight end 12, 11th by value. 12th and 13th on FanDuel. Elijah Moore drops to 55th on both sides by points. Donovan Peoples-Jones down at 72nd, not showing any kind of points per dollar value for either one of those guys. Moore gets targets. Last 3 weeks, 4 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, 2, 4, and 4 catches. Put up 59 yards last time. That was a season high. He's out there running routes. He's a skilled guy when he gets the ball in his hands, but just not delivering. Peoples-Jones, 2 of 3 for 22 yards on 18 routes last time out. 43 snaps last week. Ran 27 routes the week before. Targeted once, didn't catch it. Not really a lot going on in the Cleveland passing game, especially with Walker throwing it to them. DK should be back. Didn't play last week. Practiced all week, though. In week 6, 4 of 9 for 69 yards against Cincinnati. A bye week in week 5. Had the clunky game against the Giants. He caught a touchdown pass. He caught 3 of 4 targets. I say clunky because that was the game where Geno was limited. He took a shot, came out of the game for a little bit, came back in, finished the game, but was kind of limited. So I downgrade a little bit any concern about that game, and Metcalf did get into the end zone in that game. Tyler Lockett dealing with a hamstring issue, but full practice on Friday for him. So we've got a lot of guys in this already ugly game. We've got a lot of guys that are banged up, dealing with little limited injuries, but expected to play, which is never great. 38 yards on 4 catches, 5 targets last time out with no Metcalf out there. Week before that, 94 yards on 6 catches, 8 targets. His target volume is consistent, 6, 8, 5. Jackson Smith and Jigba, his ADOT skyrocketed from like 2 and change to like 7 and change 2 weeks ago. Caught 4 of 5 passes that week for 48 yards. Had his first last week, and then came out last week, was targeted 7 times. That became his season high. Caught 4 of those, 63 yards, and his first touchdown of the year. So the last 2 weeks, he's gotten progressively better. Now he's getting a little bit more of the volume, kind of like what we were expecting earlier. Beantown knows the chicken sandwich, Carl. Beantown knows the state. Mama says, "What's up, everybody? Who's the best play on the slate?" The best overall play on the slate, huh, Mamba? You're just here for one quick hit. You just need. Mama's got one spot with unlimited salary to spend. It's probably. I really like this Rams game. I do like me some Cooper Kupp in that spot. I think he could be a little bit sneaky. McCaff is obviously a pretty good answer to that question. If you're just talking about like pure, considering that he's so expensive, but he still ranks out in the top 5 by points per dollar on both sites. And that's just easy money to say who's the best play on the slate. It's Christian McCaffrey. I like Jalen Hurts a lot. I like Lamar on his own. I don't like Saquon, but you can't ignore for the money where he's projected. That's not a bad projection for the money. A.J. Brown to go with my Jalen Hurts. I like some Puka to go with my Cooper Kupp and my Ram stacks. Mostert, potentially another sneaky Mostert day. Not going up against a pushover opponent when it comes to rush yards or anything like that, but should be the focal point again. Trying to find somebody like sneaky on this board. It's not easy. A lot of obvious on this board today. A lot of the good teams are in good spots. So you're getting a lot of the super, super obvious guys looking good. And then a lot of the teams that could be potential value guys are like in bad spots, like that Seattle-Cleveland game that just don't look good. It's a weird week for the how the board looks. What about CD? For 7,600, 7,800 on the FanDuel slate. We haven't gotten to that game yet. But go to the Dallas side, the favored side of the game. Go to their number 1 receiver. I don't know what his ownership is going to look like, but that's not a bad price to skip ahead several games. What is he? Wow, 42nd? That's surprising. Wide receiver 6 by points, but 42nd at 7,600 on the DK board, points per dollar. That I just top of my head, I was thinking that was going to look a lot better, like kind of like what he does on FanDuel, where he's wide receiver 7 and 12 by point per dollar. Interesting. I do like the CD option, but clearly a lot better on the FanDuel site. Travis Etienne, not terrible. Kamara, I talked about liking that New Orleans offense, but I kind of like it through the air a little bit. I know we're getting completely sidetracked here. There's somebody lingering in my head that I want to conjure here. Thielen's cheap on DK. That's an interesting spot. I don't love the Carolina side of that game, but especially as a run back against Houston stacks, which I do like, Thielen is very cheap at 66. There's somebody else, though, that's like right at the front of my brain, and it's not popping for me. Well, hopefully we'll uncover it as we go. There's a couple plays in case you got to punch out, Mamba. Vic David's here. What's up, Vic? Michael Thomas on the injury report. Is he expected to play? I missed that one. Let's see what the news is on Michael Thomas. Not that we're really on that game, but let's just check. So much for any notion of keeping this to a shorter show. Illness, okay. I tell you what, and it's right there in the note that I just read as well. It does potentially create some interesting opportunities down board there. But since he's not hurt, he's just sick, I feel like Thomas will probably be out there. Keep an eye on it, obviously. Potentially could create some opportunity. All right, let's Excuse me. Let's wrap this one. The 3 tight ends, I don't think you can really go to any of them. If I had to play one of them, it would probably be Parkinson. Drawing a little bit more in terms of targets and routes, but they're really splitting that pretty much 3 ways. All of those guys are getting, 1 to 2 targets, running like, 7 to 15 routes out there for a reasonable amount of snaps, but can't really endorse any one of the 3 tight ends in that spot. Down the board for them, Jake Bobo last time out ran 24 routes on 45 snaps, caught 4 of 5 passes for 61 yards and a touchdown, but that was with DK Metcalf out. I don't really think he's getting a ton or similar target volume this week, but probably has proven himself enough to get at least some snaps, some routes run. He's been a little bit frisky for them. So I think Jake Bobo maybe has a dart throw from way down the board. No projection whatsoever to speak on. You're going to have to manually put him in to be able to get to him. He's not going to be, he would come out of the pool with that kind of a projection. And I think that's reasonable because they've got 3 receivers ahead of him at least. But as a total dart throw in a bad game against a good defense, that's your kind of thing, Bobo's going to get a few routes and a few looks is my point. Let's move on. Game I actually do like. Good. $43.5. One of our better overall totals. Yeah, just not going to work, dummy. You sorted all the games out. Whereas this here, kind of in the middle, I guess. But not that 44, 44.5, 45.5 are all that much higher. Only a 47-point peak. So it's one of our okay opportunities, Vegas-wise. I like the talent in terms of CJ Stroud. Obviously came out to start his career pretty hot. Houston's a high-paced team. Should press the action a little bit. The matchup of the rookie QBs. On Bryce's side, 217 yards and a touchdown the last time out on 38 pass attempts. Week before that, 41 pass attempts, 247 yards. Did throw 3 touchdowns. That was his best game overall, but also threw 2 picks. Hasn't thrown for more than 250 yards. The 3 TDs that he threw in week 5 were the only time that he's thrown more than 1 in a game. A 5.3 yard per pass attempt, one of the lower marks in all of football. He's thrown 6 touchdowns and 4 interceptions on the year, less than 200 yards a game. No game with more than 250. Going up against a defense that's allowed just 4 passing touchdowns on the season, despite giving up 245 yards, 6.9 yards per pass attempt. They get to the quarterback a decent amount, 21.4% of the time. Just 9 sacks. But they're putting an okay amount of pressure on. A little bit more pressure on the other side for Carolina going up against Stroud, 25.4% pressure. They're blitzing 10 percentage points more often. They're allowing 197 yards through the air, 10 touchdowns on the season passing so far this year, though. Stroud has 9 touchdown passes. He's only thrown 1 interception in his first 6 games. That's pretty impressive. That came in the most recent game. 199 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game on 27 pass attempts. Just 13 of 27 in that one. Not his best performance. 249 yards and a touchdown pass on 35 attempts the week before that. 2 touchdowns passing in each of weeks 2, 3, and 4. Definitely some upside. A little bit of chemistry going on with his 2 primary receivers for this game. Neither one of these quarterbacks runs all that much. Neither one of these quarterbacks has a rushing touchdown on the season. We're just looking for these guys for their ability to throw the ball. I like Stroud quite a bit better with his weapons. Ranks out 5th on DK, 3rd by value, 4th on FanDuel, 3rd by value. Just in the teens. Popping into the top 10 for points per dollar for Bryce Young. I don't really buy it. Not my favorite option on the board. Miles Sanders back. Yay, I guess. 7 carries for 32 yards in week 5, missed week 6, bye week in week 7. Was already losing touches to Chuba Hubbard, who played well in his absence. Hubbard picked up 19 carries, ran for 88 yards and a touchdown. Just one look in the passing game, caught it for 2 yards as the primary back in week 6. 9 carries for 35 yards in week 5 with Sanders out there. So he had 9 carries. Sanders had 7 carries that week, the last time they played on the field at the same time, or the last time they were in the same game. He had 14 carries for 41 yards in week 4. That week, Sanders had 13 carries and 3 catches for 32 total yards. Hubbard's been outplaying Sanders. It'll be interesting to see where the ball goes. They both project out pretty similarly and pretty mediocrely. I don't think I'm going to this game for running backs on either side. Dameon Pierce does project out all right. 16th by points, 11th by point per dollar on DK, 15th and 14th on the FanDuel slate. Last 3 weeks, his carries have gone 24, 20, and then dropped to 13. 81, 66, and 34 yards. Not a lot of looks in the passing game, but if they're going to hand him the ball 18 to 20 times, that's definitely a spot that you can get invested in. But he dropped to 13 carries with Singletary coming back. 12 carries, 58 yards last time out. Both of those were season highs for Devin Singletary. That was his only time over 10 carries all year long. Got 2 targets. So I think you're just dealing with like a split and a split. And kind of medium talent at best. Not a great spot for running backs in this one. Pierce probably my favorite option at the running back position in this one, but I don't really need it. There's plenty of opportunity there. In terms of the rushing attack. They ranked 28th, 4.9 yards per rush attempt, 26th, 7 yards per pass attempt. I just prefer it through the air. As mentioned, Thielen, wide receiver 23 by point per dollar on DK. Could be a little bit better, actually. I'm actually surprised to see that one as low as it is as well. I guess I don't have a great feel for how the DK PPD divides out for receiver position. It's been like 3 in a row that I've gotten not wrong on this one because that is an okay mark, but I was expecting better. So wrong. 15th on the FanDuel slate by point per dollar, wide receiver 6 for 8,200. DJ Shark, Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall Jr. These are not the prime receivers that we want for FanDuel purpose or for fantasy purposes. Everybody projects out in the mid kind of range in decreasing value. They peak at wide receiver 50. Those guys are really limited. It's the Adam Thielen show. Maybe a couple deep shot darts with DJ Shark. Jonathan Mingo was showing us a little bit of point per dollar value the last time out. Was coming up in some lineups, but he's not really in that level now. 11.2 yard ADOT, but no touchdowns on the season. Just putting up 0.8 yards per route run. Thielen giving us 2.2 yards per route run. 10 targets a game. 4 touchdowns on the year. Nice year. Considering the limited nature of that offense, too, it's not a bad year from Adam Thielen so far. Nico, the primary, the number 1 option, ranks 7th and 2nd on the DK slate, 11th and 9th on the FanDuel slate. So a better option for 5,500 on the DK board. That is a pretty significant piece of value. And then you get Tank Dell for 4,900, ranks 1st point per dollar. And you get Dalton Schultz, ranks 1st point per dollar at the tight end position. Remember when I said I like this Houston offense? That's why. Same thing on FanDuel. I like that a lot. Dell coming back. Robert Woods, like I said, is going to miss this game. So Dell should step into plenty of volume. He was already getting a decent amount. He was breaking out. Didn't play week 6. Had the bye week 7. Week 5, 57 yards on 3 of 4. Just 16 yards in week 4 on 1 of 3. But had a big week 3, 145 yards and a touchdown on 5 catches, 7 targets. Had touchdowns in weeks 2 and 3. So I think he stepped back into volume. I think he has plenty of talent. They already were developing a little bit of a connection. And considering how strongly he projects and how strongly he projects for point per dollar, I love the Tank Dell spot. I love the Nico Collins spot. Nico last time out, 80 yards, 23 routes run on 43 snaps, caught 4 of 6 targets. 3 of 4 targets the week before that, just 39 yards. Week 4, he had a big game. Caught 7 of 9 passes for 168 and 2. And then Dalton Schultz, I think, is one of the better options as a sneaky tight end. And we've mentioned him each of the last at least 3 weeks. I know we've talked about this, but it just continues. Dalton Schultz has at least one red zone target in every single game this year. That makes him an underrated tight end option when he's that cheap. 4 of 7 last week for a touchdown and 61 yards. He's had touchdowns in 3 straight games. Red zone targets are important, especially for tight ends. That is a significant touchdown option. His targets are there too. His target shares the last handful of weeks, 4, 7, 3, 3, then a big uptick to 10, and then 7. Dynamite option, especially considering Robert Woods being out. Woods was getting a lot of red zone targets. That could be even more targets in the red zone for Dalton Schultz. Love, love, love these 3 top options. Noah Brown, I think, even is semi-interesting. Probably third on the depth chart, ran 21 routes, 33 snaps in his return to action in week 6. He had missed everything except for week 1. Caught 2 of 5 targets. In week 1, he had 3 of 4 targets for 20 yards on 37 routes run, 49 snaps. But given the routes and the snaps, I think they, were kind of figuring him to have a role on this team. There's enough talent there. John Mechie, just 15 snaps with the offense, ran 5 routes, 0 targets last time out. No more than 2 targets in any given game. I don't think you're really throwing too many darts. It's a total dart throw. If you do it, he is 3,000, but doesn't rate out well. But big S's for all these 3 guys. And then I'll mix in some Noah Brown. Not a priority, but if I'm building out a bunch of Houston stacks, I think it makes tons of sense to build out, some with Noah Brown. Probably in a plus, a 1+1. Nico and Brown, Tank Dell and Brown, Schultz and Brown. Schultz and Brown gets you really different and pretty cheap. But everybody on this team is cheap. Houston, a major, major source of value here. Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. Mentioned liking the Jacksonville side of this one, which I do. Driven a lot by their skill players. I like Lawrence, but he hasn't had that, absolute monster game this season. Let me just fix the... Projects out pretty well, though, Trevor Lawrence. 6,200 on the DK slate. Travis Etienne, a premium running back option. Some very good receivers to work with in Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. A premium tight end in Evan Engram. No Zay Jones this week, but Jamal Agnew probably goes back into that spot where he takes a little step forward. So I like the Agnew option as a cheapo pivot. 3,000 on the DK slate. I do not mind going to him. Let me pull up... Go back to the Jags depth chart here. Agnew had, which week was it? Week 3. 39 snaps with the offense. Ran 31 routes, targeted 5 times, caught 4 of them for 49 yards. Not a monster fantasy day, obviously, but I think we could step back into that kind of volume. Last week, week 7, 28 snaps with the offense. Caught 4 of 6 targets for 36 yards. 20 routes run. Those were his 2 most involved days. But I think you've got a little upside even that far down the depth chart. Kenny Pickett, since it's not the preseason, I guess we don't get to succeed with him all that often. But I do like Deontay Johnson. I do like George Pickens. I wish we only had one of these running backs because then I think that would be a decent situation. But it's yet another just kind of split between 2 medium talents. 2, B- kind of guys. I prefer Warren slightly, a little bit less expensive, a little bit more involvement in the passing game. But they're just really splitting that down the middle. So I don't love the rushing game in the Pittsburgh side. I kind of more into the passing. 41 point total, 2.5 point dogs. I don't need to go to Pittsburgh stacks here. I do need to go to Jag stacks, though. Lawrence ranks 6th and 4th on DK, 5th and 6th on FanDuel. Going up against a defense that's allowing 240 yards, 9 touchdowns already on the season, only drawing pressure 18% of the time despite a 26% blitz rate. That said, 29 sacks is not insignificant for that defense. That's a pretty high sack total. Highest on the board, I'm going to guess. Yep. So that's the most sacks on the board. Where are they? Despite their 18.6% pressure rate ranks here. All right, so not getting a ton of pressure, but it pays off when they do. Vic David Figueroa says The Last Boy Scout is a fantastic movie. 100% agreed. We've talked about The Last Boy Scout on this show before, I'm pretty sure. Maybe not this show, one of the others, but I know Last Boy Scout's come up. I love Shane Black movies. Dude's a good screenwriter. If you're into, like, you know, buddy cop, like guy movie type movies. If you haven't seen The Nice Guys with Russell Crowe and the hell's his name? Ryan Gosling. Shane Black wrote that, and it's the best buddy cop movie that's come out in forever. Funny, like really, really funny, really well done. Fun, like old style buddy cop type movie. But yeah, Shane Black. Oh, come on. There he is. How about this for a screenwriting run, since this is what we need to talk about? How about starting your career with Lethal Weapon? The same year, 1987, he wrote The Monster Squad. Little known movie. Gang of kids fighting against Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein. Technically Frank's on their side. Little spoiler there. The Mummy, Swamp Thing. Wolfman's got nards? If you remember that movie. He wrote The Last Boy Scout. He wrote The Last Action Hero, which is an underrated Schwarzenegger movie. Ahead of its time. He wrote The Long Kiss Goodnight, which is a very good action movie with Gina Davis and Sam Jackson from 1996. He wrote Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is a very good Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer vehicle. That's another just totally funny buddy cop movie. Val Kilmer is hysterical in that movie. Really, really good. He wrote Iron Man 3. He wrote The Nice Guys. And then he wrote the most recent The Predator. Or not the most recent Predator movie. That was Prey, which was terrific. He wrote The Predator, the one before that, which was not that good. Probably his worst screenwriting credit. Everything else on here is friggin' fantastic. He was also an uncredited script doctor on the first Predator. He's in Predator, actually, because they had him. They couldn't bring him down to the jungle as a writer, so they put him in the movie. The skinny, nerdy guy with the glasses, Hawkins. That's Shane Black. They had him on. They had him on set just so he could do punch-ups. The Hunt for Red October, he did punch-ups. RoboCop 3 and Dead Heat. Big Shane Black fan. Vic says checking that out next. Yeah, big solid recommendations if you haven't seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys. I'd probably say Nice Guys first, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang second, but you can't go wrong either way. Heat is coming on next. What channel? You mean coming on that list? He didn't write Heat, but that's a terrific movie as well. And if Heat was on right now, I would put it on. Alan S. says, Etienne smash spot. The Rams put up 135 rush yards. Gave up 135 rush yards. I assume you mean. Last Boy Scout, did you say Arnold? I thought you said Arnold. No, I said Arnold for Last Action Hero. Last Boy Scout, Bruce Willis, Damon Wayans. Last Action Hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Tywin Lannister in a younger role. Anyway, I think we can get back to football now. This has been your Hollywood Minute. Oh, wait, Hollywood Minute I think is copyrighted. This has been your visit through Movie Land. Boy, that's clunky. Mama said Last Boy Scouts in my top 10. I love that movie. Underrated. Again, buddy cop movie. Bruce Willis buddy cop movie. Sad what happened to Bruce. I hate thinking that we'll never see a new Bruce Willis movie ever again. Kind of sucks. Not that I watched like 90% of what he's cranked out over the last few years, because it's all just been that straight to streaming. He's doing it with an earpiece in. They're telling him what to say, and he's not really acting kind of stuff. That sucks. But Bruce was a great one. You know what's on streaming that I noticed yesterday on, I think, Peacock, I want to say? They have the entire run of Moonlighting, the old Bruce Willis, Sybil Shepherd show. Anybody from the 70s, 80s probably remembers it. I remember it not from watching it then, but in like reruns. It was on at like 3 p.m. on reruns back in the 90s. And I was a huge Bruce Willis fan from like Die Hard. I was like, oh shit, it's a series with the guy from Die Hard. This is awesome. So I watched a ton of those. Funny show. He's a detective. Sybil Shepherd's like the owner of the detective agency. They're in love. A lot of like fourth wall breaks, talking to the camera. A lot of really funny, like inventive stuff. Die Hard with a Vengeance is legend. Yes. Die Hard 1, Die Hard 3. Excellent movies. 2 is not bad. I'll stand here for 2. Probably more because there's a chance I even saw Die Hard 2 before I saw Die Hard 1. I'm not entirely sure. But I saw it like back before you could process like, well, this one's not as good as that one. It was just like, oh, big action movie. It rocks. I was like 12 or 10 or whatever. So I have no problems with Die Hard 2. All right, so Travis Etienne. Premium option, 21.7 on the DK scale on the back of a few catches. RB2 on both sites. RB6 point per dollar on FanDuel because he's a little bit lower projected over there. But excellent opportunity for him. They're giving up 142 yards on the ground, 4.7 yards per rush attempt. He's putting up 4 yards per rush attempt, so those go together pretty well. 72 yards a game on 18 carries. Also very involved in the passing attack. 4 targets a game, catching 3.5 of them. No red zone targets on the year, but doesn't really need him to succeed. I have no issues with the Travis Etienne play. I think at worst, you've got a really good opportunity for Travis Etienne to put up like a 90, 100 and change yard day, and then you're dealing with a little bit of a coin flip on the touchdown. They're not giving up a ton of touchdowns on the ground, but he's got the ability to find it for sure. As I said, I don't really love the split between these two guys. 58% of the snaps, 46% of the snaps last week, 54-45 overall for the season. 12.8 carries, 6.6 carries. A little bit more in terms of targets for Jalen. 4.5 targets versus the 2 that Najee's getting. Just 1 red zone target apiece. They're both involved, but neither one has really broken through and seized the role. So they both rank 23-25, 19-21. They're right next to one another. And neither one looks great. Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. It falls Kirk on top this week. I still think that Calvin Ridley is the, maybe it's just some memory and some bias and everything on my part. But to me, Calvin Ridley's still my number one. 95 yards a game versus 85 yards a game. And he's doing it on only 3.5 catches versus 5.5 catches. 3 touchdowns on the season for Kirk versus 2 for Ridley. 12.9 yard ADOT, so he's gotten more opportunities down the field. If you're talking about Calvin Ridley, just got to start hauling him in. Getting more looks in the red zone with 6 targets in the red zone to Christian Kirk's 2. If people go to these receivers in the order that they're projected here, where Kirk is a little bit more highly owned than Ridley, I'll take my Ridley shares. I'm going to just keep crashing and burning with Calvin Ridley shares until it works out because I think the talent is there. And then the quarterback can clearly deliver him the ball. But Christian Kirk is a very good option here. Plenty of targets. He's getting targeted. Where is it? Come on. 8 times a game, 8.6. Ridley getting 1 fewer target. Evan Engram drawing almost 7 targets a game. And Jamal Agnew. Oh, excuse me. I'm looking at the yards per target. Those are my mistake. Do I not have? Oh, there it is. 8, 7, and 7. So I wasn't wrong. I was just in the wrong column. He's getting 1 fewer target per game. 8 targets a game, 7 targets a game. Engram getting 7 targets a game. Agnew, this was the one that threw me. I was like, well, Agnew's not getting 7.5 targets a game. Each of these guys are putting up about the right numbers there. 2 targets a game so far for Agnew, but we did see that little bit of an uptick for him that last time he had the opportunity to step in for Zay Jones. Downboard, nobody really relevant down here. On the Pittsburgh side, Pickens, wide receiver 27. Deontay, wide receiver 26. But he pops to 10th by value for 5,000. I'm kind of glad I don't have to get involved with them on the FanDuel slate. Deontay, super talented, famously didn't score a touchdown last year despite pretty significant number of catches. But a 1,000-yard receiver a couple times over. Plenty of talent there. Getting targeted 6 times a game since he's been back. 8 targets a game for George Pickens. Pickens has 2 touchdowns on the season. 4 targets in the red zone. No Freiermuth, just kind of confuses this offense in the red zone. You got Connor Hayward here as a dart throw tight end, but he doesn't project out well. You get Allen Robinson, doesn't project out well. Calvin Austin doesn't really project out well. So it's really about Pickens and Deontay in this offense. And I think they just function better as run back plays against the Jacksonville stack than anything else. I'm really not getting invested in the Pittsburgh stack here. I just don't see Kenny Pickett paying it off enough for me. How many touchdowns has he even thrown? Whoops. 5 touchdowns on the season in 6 games. .8 air yards per attempt, 6.8 yards per attempt. Yeah, I really don't need to go to the Pittsburgh side of this one. I think I'll take my shares of the 2 receivers coming back the other way against Jacksonville stacks, and I'll have a bunch of Jacksonville stacks, I think is the way to approach this one. Etienne's 8% owned, RB 10 by ownership. That's a killer spot. That's did I click away from it yet? Yeah, for considering that he's RB2 by points and value, that's obviously a extreme lever based on our projections. He's probably projected lower around town, I would think. I'm probably a little bit ahead of the field on him. I'm kind of happy to be there if he's going to be that low owned. That's surprising that he's that far down. This is the weather game. Somebody was pointing it out again, but we touched on it early. It's going to be in the 20s, and they're expecting about 6 inches of snow at game time. Do with that information what you will. My typical approach is to let Vegas handle it. This line probably already accounts for some weather, but you might see it drop to 43.5, 43. I don't think it goes much lower than that. Probably doesn't even go that low. But let Vegas handle it. If points come off the Vegas total, then everything downstream in the model gets stripped. Opportunity shares lessen, or excuse me, opportunity totals lessen, and then each guy has their shares of the opportunity totals. So as that lessens, their shares less, and it just all meters out nicely. When we say let Vegas handle it, that's really what we mean. For these unquantifiable things, Vegas employs teams of MIT nerds to figure this stuff out, and even they really don't know how to quantify it. So let them figure it out. Let them try to quantify it. We'll just take what we get from them and we'll run with it, because that's what everybody in our industry is doing. Anybody who's sitting here telling you that they know exactly what impact a bunch of snow and some cold weather is going to have in this game is just lying to you. So just take it for how it's projected, whatever it comes out as in my numbers, stochastic numbers, RG's numbers, whoever you use. Just take on faith that it's all based on the same Vegas information. Don't take it on faith, because if something looks weird, they're probably screwing with it and trying to do it themselves. If it's a normal projection, take it on faith that it's coming through Vegas and it's the best that anybody's going to be able to guess at it. Outside of that, I really don't want to speculate on what the snow might do, because we're talking about Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Outside of anybody else in this game, those 2 guys, I have no idea what a little bit of snow is going to do. They don't need much yardage to connect 3 times for touchdowns. It could be Isaiah Pacheco Day between the 20s, and then once they get into the red zone, it becomes Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce Day. It could be anything, so it's just not worth speculating about too much. Knicks lost. That game's over already? God, I've been talking for a while. So to get into this one, these teams are, we're going to treat them as who they are. So there's got to be some obvious interest in KC. My hope is that the weather situation starts to concern people and KC goes under-owned because of it. I think that creates opportunity. Anytime you get a chaotic situation where people are just guessing at shit, it becomes more interesting to me because it creates opportunity. If Pat Mahomes, there's nothing that tells me that Patrick Mahomes can't succeed in this spot. He's QB3 by projection, QB10 on the DK slate by points per dollar, 3 and 5 on the FanDuel slate. No such love for Russ Wilson in the model, 19 and 16, 18 and 20. He's going up against the Chiefs defense that's allowed just 8 touchdowns on the year, only 188 yards per game, 5.6 yards per pass attempt on the season. That ranks second overall in football, 5.6 yards per pass attempt. Chiefs defense, in terms of shutting down the pass anyway, kind of underrated. Not great against the run, 26th, 4.6 yards per rush attempt. Maybe Javonte Williams' day, but he's in another kind of split up backfield. He came into the season coming off a major injury, with them handling him with kid gloves, trying to protect him in terms of his carries, his exposure, and yada yada. Got hurt already, missed a game or 2 games, was already in a split situation with Samaje, and then when he was out, Jaleel McLaughlin exploded a couple times for big runs. Didn't have monster fantasy games, but had a couple really big runs in there. So now it's become like a 3-headed backfield where Javonte's still probably a little bit limited. And then you've got a few looks going in Samaje's direction and a few going this way. So it just takes away a couple opportunities from him. It just strips down all the value in that running attack. So I don't love that option. And then the receivers are limited by the defense and by just Russ's struggles. I do like Courtland Sutton. I do like Jerry Jeudy. I think they're talented guys. Marvin Mims has tons and tons of talent if they decide that they're going to throw him the ball. What did he do last week? I know I had some, and I don't remember it going well. Yep, yet another week with just 1 target. Ran 14 routes. That tied his season high for routes run. 17 snaps with the offense. They just don't want to involve him. 2 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown in week 2. 3 catches for 73 yards in week 3. Currently, those are his season highlights. From Mahomes' side, he's going up against a pass defense that's allowed 16 passing touchdowns on the season, 257 yards through the air. They're the worst defense in football, even with snow and everything. Again, there's just no reason to expect that Patrick Mahomes can't succeed here. 15 touchdown passes on the season. He's thrown 6 picks. Running the ball a little bit, 6.5 yards per rush attempt, 214 yards on the season. About 5 carries a game or so. Definitely a capable runner. Tends to do more of it away from the goal line. Every now and then you get him running one in. But a lot of it's, little 8-10 yard scrambles. They're concentrated on the ridiculous options down the field in the passing attack, and he gets an open opportunity to run the ball. Javonte. Let's see. So last time out, Javonte carried it 15 times for 82 yards. That's encouraging. 3 of 4 through the air for a few additional touches. So 18 touches, 29 snaps. It's not bad. But you do have the other options there, which is just, I don't love I just don't love targeting split backfield situations. I just want secure volume. Just 2 carries for Samaje last time, but he was targeted 3 times. 13 snaps. And then McLaughlin ended up with 10 snaps, 5 carries, 45 yards, and 2 targets. So between the two of them, we're talking about, what was that, like 15, 16 touches that went in different directions? Javonte's still the number 1 in that scenario. He projects out all right, 18th and 14th, 17th and 12th. A little better on FanDuel because he only costs $6,000 against that cap. None of the other guys project out well at all. McLaughlin could easily break one of the 5 to 8 carries that he'll end up getting. But, you get pretty thin most of the time. You're probably booking a 0 or a low single-digit score most of the time you put that in. Pacheco is kind of taking the reins in the backfield on the Chiefs side of things. CEH has become an afterthought over there. McKinnon basically the passing down back. But Pacheco, 4 targets last week, caught all 4 of them. 6 targets the week before, caught all 6 of them. Scored a touchdown in the passing game last week. Had 13 carries for 32 yards, 16 carries for 62 yards the week before. CEH ended up with just 2 carries last week, 2 the week before, 3 each of the 2 weeks before that. He's just not involved here. And then McKinnon, I always like to throw some darts with McKinnon. I mean, not always. I'm not going out of my way to roster Jared McKinnon. But if I end up with him in a couple of lineups as just like a dart throw pass catcher of a running back, I don't mind it. I'll always take a couple of shares of him, especially if I'm overloaded with Chief stacks. It's just a good way to differentiate a Chief stack with a guy who can realistically get a look near the end zone. He had 2 touchdowns in week 3. Caught 3 of 3 passes for 19 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's the kind of ceiling day. That's all we're really looking for with the McKinnon play. We're not saying he's going to go out there and touch the ball 25 times. He's going to touch the ball 3 to 5 times. You need him to score 2 touchdowns for it because he's not going to get a lot of yardage. Unless one of those touches happens at the 5-yard line and he breaks it, obviously. He's got a possibility of yardage, but you're really looking at a touchdown-dependent receiving running back play. Doesn't grade out all that well. This is one I wish I had the target shares loaded up for. I hate this passing attack outside of Travis Kelce and a little bit of Rashee Rice. Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman, MVS. None of those guys is overly talented. They all project out in like the mid-range. They're all very cheap. None of them grades out crazy good. 31st by value for Sky Moore at 3,200 on the DK board is the best out of the non-Rashee Rice. And Rice, by the way, doesn't really grade out all that great either. Kelce is the premium option here. Oh, you know what? I forgot. I put this here. Week 7. So I don't have the route run here, but Tony got 1 target. Pacheco got 4. We talked about that. Rashee Rice got 6, which again is why, the uptick in volume right here over the last 5 weeks for Rashee Rice is noticeable. Compare this line to all these others. So he's the nominal WR1. Sky Moore, 3 targets last week. McKinnon had his 2. Noah Gray and Blake Bell each got 1. Noah Gray's the backup tight end that I prefer. Targets each of these weeks where Blake Bell not really involved outside of week 1. Gray gets a couple of looks here and there. A couple of looks in the red zone here and there. Another guy that if I'm building 25 lineups with the Chiefs, maybe he ends up in 1 and it's a loose maybe. Much more interested in Noah Gray shares for showdown type slates. But not completely off the board. Justin Watson, no target last week. Limited target shares going back in time. Justin Ross, no targets last week. I think he's not going to be active this week. Didn't he get arrested or something? Am I misspeaking there? I feel like I heard that he got arrested. Placed on exempt list following arrest, so he will not be playing. What did he do? Ooh, a felony. Felony criminal damage charge. I guess he smashed something up. All right, so he won't be here. MVS is MVS. 5 targets last week. Typically gets his targets down the field. A deep shot option for sure. Mecole Hardman was targeted 3 times in his return to the Chiefs. There's a little bit of potential there. A little bit of, hey, how are you? I remember you. Had some good seasons. Good from the mid-range, 500-600 yards, 3 to 5 touchdowns. But came back to the team, hyper familiar with the offense, and immediately got involved. And then you've got the monster of Travis Kelce with all his targets here. So it's very clearly Travis Kelce as many times as you can get him, regardless almost of popularity. And then Rashee Rice. And then maybe a couple Sky Moore darts, MVS darts, and Mecole Hardman darts. There's just a lot of options that really not that many of them are good. And with all that said, it'll probably end up being Kadarius Toney Day. He did have 6 targets each of weeks 5 and 6. One of those was a good week. The rest of his weeks haven't been good. The Denver side of things, Sutton's fine. He's last time out, 6 targets. Caught all 6 of them. 76 yards and a touchdown. Caught 4 of 6. Scored a touchdown the week before that. Has 5 touchdowns on the year in 5 different weeks out of the 7 games they've played. It's enough involvement to maybe throw some darts at it. At worst, he's a good option as a bring-back play against KC stacks. Jerry Jeudy hasn't been as successful so far this year. Having a little bit of a tough time getting going. He missed week 1. He had 6 catches as his season high in week 5. Had 5 catches last week on 5 targets against Green Bay. 64 yards. Yet to score a touchdown. Yet to go beyond the 81 yards that he put up in week 3 at Miami. Jeudy hasn't had a good fantasy day yet this year. That's not to say that he can't. There's nothing predictive about not having one yet. He's a mix-in. If you're excited about Russ for some reason, throwing the ball now that it's snowing and cold, maybe he gets you there. Mims, like I said, just too limited in the targets. Renders him almost valueless. It's difficult to see him getting even to these projections when they don't throw him the ball. But the talent dictates that he's got to have that kind of a projection. I'll probably peel him back a little bit overnight. I'll probably take a little bit of target share away from him just because they continue to not look his direction. So, Kelsey and Mahomes and a couple of the other receivers, Pacheco, and then some shares coming back the other way of Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. That's about it. Much better game situation here. 46-point total, 6.5-point favorites for Dallas at home. But like I said, I think that line is off. I think this is a good betting opportunity. Take the Rams side of that against that point spread. I don't mind that at all. Dallas, 18th ranked against the run, 4.1 yards per rush attempt. That's the Rams. 19th ranked against the run, 4.2 yards per rush attempt. 12th ranked against the pass, 6.2 yards per pass attempt. But this is a dynamic passing attack. Stafford has a clear connection with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. They're both capable of putting up monster games in the same week as we've seen. Tons and tons and tons of targets going their way. Tutu falling a little bit by the wayside since Cooper's come back, but still gets his occasional looks. Can still get it in the end zone. Darrell Henderson back with this team now and presumably the primary back. Higbee is a reasonable tight end play for cheap. I probably don't go downboard to the Skoroneks, the Royce Freemans of the world. On the Dallas side, you've got CD, who I mentioned earlier. Brandon Cooks, who despite not a tremendous amount of success this year, I still think is an interesting option. Jake Ferguson, a very strong tight end option. And then Tony Pollard, obviously a good running back play. So plenty of potential on both sides here. $12 touchdowns allowed by the Rams and 300 yards a game. That should be a good day for Dak. We've seen Dak fail on good days. There should be good days for Dak before, but he's also facing just 17% pressure, 13 sacks on the season, only 4 picks. There's a lot to like about the situationality of this game for Dak. Situationality. Clunky word. Don't think it's actually a word. 1 rushing touchdown on the season for Prescott so far. Taking off 3.2 times a game, 4.5 yards per rush attempt. Neither one of these guys is a quarterback that you want for what he does on the ground, though. 6 passing touchdowns for Dak, 7 passing touchdowns for Stafford. A concerning ratio, 7 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. But he's throwing for 270 yards a game. Stafford. Plenty of upside. 222 yards a game for Dak. I'll take the quarterbacks on either side. 7 yards per pass attempt, 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Plenty of intended air yards. Good receivers to throw to. Pollard, RB5, RB9 on DK. 4 and 2 looks a little bit better even on the FanDuel slate for a similar price against the higher cap. I'll probably end up with a pretty fair amount of Tony Pollard, given where he rates out. Last time out, 50 snaps, 15 carries. Caught 6 of 7 targets for 80 yards. Involved in both aspects of the offense. Plenty of touches, plenty of opportunities. Like to see him get in the end zone a little bit more frequently. 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, both in week 1. No receiving touchdowns on the season. Only 100-yard rushing game. 2 other weeks, over 100 combined yards. Week 2 and then last time out. Probably overdrafted in season-long leagues, but tons and tons of talent for DFS, especially with his price dropping. I don't love the Henderson-Freeman situation here. Hendo signed back to this team off the street before last week's game. Super familiar with the offense, been on this team the last handful of years, and still not old, as I pointed out last week, only 26 years old. So it's not like he was a washed up like 30-something guy who had been out of the league and they brought him back. He's still in the prime of his career. Came back, carried the ball 18 times in his first game back with the team, 61 yards, scored a touchdown, caught 1 of 2 passes. Came immediately back into being the featured back here. I just don't know really overall what it looks like in the long term. Ranks 20th, but 13th by point per dollar, 21st, 15th. He's borderline playable. But you do have Freeman there. You do have Evans lingering there. There's other better running back options for you. A couple darts at 13th by point per dollar, though, isn't the worst idea in the world. Let's start with the Dallas side here. Let me look at some of these. So CD caught all 7 of his targets last week for 117. Only has 1 receiving touchdown on the year. 3 games with 53 yards or less. All 3 of those he had only 4 catches. But an 11-catch, 143-yard game week 2, and then 117 yards on 7 catches in the last game. Cooks, the volume's been just okay. 4 targets each of the last 3 weeks. Week 4 and week 6, he caught all 4 of them. And then in week 5, he only caught 1 of them. 1 receiving touchdown on the season. It did come in their last game, week 6, at the Chargers. Caught 4 passes, 4 of 4 for 36 yards and a touchdown. But I don't know. For a receiver that I think is very talented, has had some good years, that's really a lot more limited than I expected him to be overall this year. I just think by virtue of nobody else has really exceeded him, you can still go there, and I think they will still go to him. But he's been kind of limited. That's probably part of the problem overall with Dak's touchdown total. Ferg at the tight end position, Jake Ferguson, just 1 catch last time out on 1 target. 3 of 3 the week before that. Week 4, he had a decent game, 7 of 7 for 77 yards. Basically catches everything thrown toward him. Has a fair amount of opportunities in the red zone, but not the last 2 weeks. Each of the last 2 weeks, 0 red zone targets. Before that, 5 in week 1, then 3, then 1, then 2. Definitely an option for Dak when they get in close. If you go downboard to the Gallups and Tolberts and Turpins of the world, Gallup, 10 targets last time out. Only caught 3 of them for 24 yards. 5 targets the week before that, caught 2 of them for 15. Had an okay day in week 4, caught 5 of 6, but for only 60 yards. 6 of 7 in week 3 is encouraging, 92 yards that week. But just with the idea that he's not really catching that much of what they're targeting him. I don't know where... I have his ADOT on this one. Oh, wait, I have it over here. I don't know if it's a matter of Dak missing him. 11.1 yard ADOT, so they are throwing him down the field. Only 3 drops on the season. Just not connecting. Does rank 20th by point per dollar because he only costs 3,400 on DK. 52nd and 53rd for 5,500 on the FanDuel slate. I think on DK you could throw a couple darts in his direction if you're building Dallas stacks. We've seen him succeed. Last/best year was in 2019. 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. Last year, 424 yards, 4 touchdowns on 39 catches. About like that the year before. A reasonable enough dart throw for very, very, very cheap over on DK. And then there's the Cup, Nakua, Atwell, so on and so forth of it all. Since coming back, Cooper Kupp. Targets have been 12, then 9, then 7. Caught 8, then 7, then 2. Not a great game in week 7 against Pittsburgh. Just 2 catches on 7 targets for 29 yards. Had 100 yards in each of the first 2 games back, a touchdown in his second game back. It's Cooper Kupp. I don't think we need to overthink it. Puka basically maintained most of his volume. Last week he overshadowed Kupp. It overshadowed as I was scrolling past that note. So I'll credit that one to this is RotoWire that I'm looking at these target shares on. Their note said overshadows Kupp and loss, and it just caught my eyes as I scrolled past it. He did though. 12 targets, 8 catches, 154 yards. He had a clunky week 6 also. 4 catches, 7 on 7 targets, 26 yards. And then in Kupp's first week back, he was targeted 11 times, caught 7 of them, 71 yards and a touchdown. Overall, the volume, it's down slightly in one of the 3 games, but was right where it was in the other 2. So I think there's enough here to support both of them. I really do. I think you can play them together. I think you can play either one of them alongside a Stafford play. 2-2 for what he brings to the table for us. Scored the touchdown, if I remember correctly, in the first week with Kupp back, and then had another one last time. Just targeted twice last week, though. Caught one of them. Targeted just once the week before that. Caught it. Didn't score a touchdown, 30-yarder. And then 5 targets in the first Kupp game. Caught 2 of them, just 9 yards, but scored the touchdown. He's more limited now. The targets are more limited. The opportunity to rack up a couple decent size catches so that you can get to yardage totals without catching too much volume. That's also been a little bit limited. So he becomes much more touchdown dependent now. 17th by point per dollar isn't terrible for 4,400. 5,400, 33rd by point per dollar isn't great on the FanDuel slate. He's playable, but I greatly prefer these 2 options, and I probably prefer Higbee just for a different kind of an option. But Atwell's not off the board. Higbee did give us 1 catch on 3 targets last week. 3 targets each of the last 3 weeks. Caught 2 of them each of weeks 5 and 6. Yet to score a touchdown this season. Yet to go over the 71 yards that he put up in week 3. Targeted in the red zone 3 times all year. Projects out fine. 10th, 3rd by point per dollar because he's only 3,300. Just on name recognition alone, getting Tyler Higbee in this offense for 3,300 is not all that bad. Vic only likes Ferguson from this game. Interesting. Whoops, that's the NBA file. I like quite a bit more of this game, Vic. I think we're going to be on opposite sides of that one, pal. Yeah, I like multiple wide receivers on both sides. I can get to some Tony Pollard. I like the quarterbacks. This just seems like one of the spots that's more likely to be a decent-sized shootout with all the talent on both sides. I know Vegas doesn't necessarily see it staying close, but I've been eyeing this line all week long. I think we talked about everybody relevant over here. Skoranic's not relevant anymore. None of those downboard guys are. I started touching on Turpin and Tolbert and got distracted. Just want to... Turpin, just 2 targets in the last 4 weeks. Not that relevant. Tolbert, 0 targets each of the last 2 weeks. Caught 4 of 4 in week 4 for 53 yards. That was his relevant game. Turpin is the return man, right? Turpin's the one I'm a little bit more interested in. Just the return man. Also gets a little bit of gadget plays. He runs the ball every now and then. But neither one of those guys is any kind of priority. They're just total dart throws from down the board. But Turpin is the slightly more interesting of the two. Moving on from that. A few games to go. Minnesota, Green Bay. Who's going to this game? Not like going physically. Like, who's going to this game for DFS? Does anybody like I think it's okay in terms of how it looked in the model. I just don't really like it. I don't really want to go here. Cousins probably a little expensive for what he's projected for. QB 21 on DK by point per dollar. 8th by points. 8th by points on FanDuel. QB 11 over there. Jordan Love, 11th by points and value on DK. 11th and 16th on FanDuel. Coming off a crushing disappointment in a spot that he was projected out really, really well the last time we played fantasy football. I don't really like it. 28.5% pressure rate, 25.2% against Cousins. Considering that Love's going to be pressured a decent amount, they're not racking up huge sack totals. They haven't put up huge interception totals. They're allowing 224 yards passing. They've given up 10 touchdowns on the season, a 7.3 yard defensive ADOT, 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Against a quarterback I believed in a little bit more, there'd be at least a little bit of justification for playing him there. But 10 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions on the season, 6.5 yards per pass attempt, just 210 yards a game. I don't know. I don't think I want to get invested again. 293 yards a game for Kirk Cousins, 16 touchdowns on the season. That's a little bit more compelling. But again, just like last time, playing with no Justin Jefferson. He does have Addison, who he's developed a bit of a connection with. He does have KJ, who he can work with. Hawkinson. There are options in that offense. I don't know. I struggle with it a little bit. Green Bay ranks 11th against the pass, 6.1 yards per pass attempt. On the other side, Minnesota ranks 20th, 6.8 yards per pass attempt. They're 6th against the run, though, 3.6 yards per rush attempt. So, like, they'll open it up a little bit for the quarterback that I don't want to use, and they'll pinch it down a little bit on the running back that I could probably be talked into in a different situation. Aaron Jones, when healthy, very, very talented back. Hasn't been healthy all that often this season, but when he is, he's involved on the ground. Racks up 18 to 20 touches because he's involved through the air as well. 6,400, 15th and 24th on DK, 16th and 19th on FanDuel. Projects out just, as an also ran. A.J. Dillon still going to be there to bite a few touches from him. So far for the season, Dillon's carrying the ball 13 times a game. Jones carrying the ball just 7 times a game, but he's been banged up again. 4.3 yards per rush attempt versus 3.2 tells the real story. A rushing touchdown apiece so far. Jones has 5 targets in the red zone. He's got 1 receiving touchdown. Dillon not really involved in the passing attack at all. 1.3 targets a game versus 3.6. But still not overly comfortable with Aaron Jones in the just banged up nature of how he's been playing. And I don't love going against the rush attack here, or the rush D here. Alexander Madison, another guy. Middling projection. 21st and 26th, 24th and 23rd. I swear there's good running backs on this slate somewhere, but we have not been uncovering many of them. What do we have? McCaffrey, Etienne, some Derrick Henry, but he didn't really project great. Who else? There really haven't been any. Pollard, maybe? There haven't been a ton of priority running backs. Madison should pick up a little bit from the idea that they're giving up 143 yards a game, 4.5 yards per attempt, a touchdown a game, but 12.8 carries, 51 yards, hasn't scored on the ground yet this season. Has Minnesota scored a rushing touchdown yet? All season? Minnesota has not scored a rushing touchdown this season. 134 carries, 524 yards, 3.9 yards per carry, 0 rushing touchdowns. That's terrible. That is just god-awful. Second fewest attempts. The Bengals are the fewest attempts at 121. They've only got 1 rushing touchdown. Yeah, that's really bad. Dolphins lead the league with 15 rushing touchdowns. Niners second with 13. Let's see. Downboard options for Minnesota here. Got Akers. He carried the ball 10 times last week. 2 of 3 through the air. Where the hell is he? I must have cut him off by accident too. Seeing projections? Getting into the weeds here. I just want to make sure he's on the board. Yeah, he is. Why is that missing columns? Weird. Yeah, so Akers, 6-point FanDuel projection, 6.8 DK projection. Not a lot to see there. I don't love the running backs in this one. I really don't. Receivers. Addison has been the primary weapon in this passing attack in terms of wide receivers. He ranks 11th and 5th on DK, 9th and 10th on the FanDuel slate. Hawkinson, tight end 3, but 12th by point per dollar. In that spot, I don't really mind that point per dollar that much, especially if it keeps him a little lower owned than he should be. He's a key part of the passing attack here. Ranks 3rd and 2nd on the FanDuel slate. I think KJ, bit more involved of late, but doesn't project out well. Brandon Powell, the nominal WR3 in that offense now, but target 4 because Hawkinson's there. I continue to expect this passing attack to kind of crash and burn a little without Jefferson there. Maybe it took a week or two. Let's look at some of the shares where they're going here though. Addison last time out, 7 of 10 for 123 and 2 touchdowns. At least 1 touchdown each of the last 3 weeks. Like I said, the primary wide receiver in this offense now. KJ, 6 targets, caught 5 of them for 47. No touchdown last week. Similar numbers each of the last 3 weeks. 5, 4, and 5 catches on 9, 5, and 6 targets. No touchdowns to speak of. Did have a touchdown in week 2 and in week 3. Red zone targets. Had at least 1 red zone target each of the first 5 weeks, and then not targeted in the red zone the last 2 weeks, oddly. Brandon Powell targeted 5 times last week, caught 4 of them for 64 yards. Carried the ball once each of the last 3 weeks. But he's been involved, 6 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets. Potentially a sneaky guy if you're looking for sneaky options in the Vikings passing attack. You can grab some Brandon Powell there. But that's already getting pretty thin once you start talking about, I'm grabbing the 4th option in the Vikings passing attack. If you want to go to the 5th option, you've got N'Keal Harry sitting there. He has not been targeted all season. He has run 1 route all season, so you probably don't actually have N'Keal Harry sitting there. Tristan Jackson ran 0 routes last week, but was targeted once and caught it, so probably ran a couple routes that they didn't record. 11 snaps with the offense for Tristan Jackson last week. It's really Addison, Hawkinson, some KJ, and then your dart throw. That's about it. That's 4 options. I mean, it's not exactly paper thin. Probably better than the other side. Watson, high-end receiver, also inexpensive. We are 6 by point per dollar. 11th on the FanDuel slate by point per dollar at 6,300. So a much better option for Christian Watson. With the idea that they're giving up so much through the air, that Watson play gets a little interesting. It doesn't bring me to the love stack, the Green Bay stack, but maybe some Watson out on his own in other lineups, maybe some Watson coming back the other way against some Minnesota stacks. I can see that being a little bit relevant. Romeo Doubs, the number 2 for 4,900, doesn't project out great, doesn't rank out great. Musgrave, as I mentioned, came back to practice, might end up playing, still questionable so far. Just keep an eye on that scenario. He's a playable tight end if he goes. But again, I think it's just a little bit limited by the quarterback play. Across those 3 top options, though, in the passing game, 5 targets, 3 catches for Watson last time out. Romeo Doubs had 5 targets. He caught 2 of them. He scored a touchdown, 30 yards. And then Musgrave was targeted 5 times on 22 routes, caught 4 of them for 30 yards. He was banged up with an ankle issue. They're calling him a game time decision in the notes, listed as questionable. LaFleur quoted as saying, "I don't think too many guys would have been able to come back that quickly from what happened to him." If he's out there, you can throw some dart. Well, it's not even that big a dart throw. If he's out there, you can play him as a tight end in an offense that I don't really like going to. Why is this looking all funky? I must have stretched that at some point by accident. Down the board in their passing attack, it's, again, getting really, really thin if you want to start talking Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, and even further down the board, the Tories and the Malik Heaths of the world. Reed did get 4 targets last week, caught 3 of them, 21 yards and a touchdown. He's got 3 touchdowns on the season. 2 of them came in week 2 against Atlanta. Peak of 8 targets that came that same week. Last 3 weeks, 5 targets, 2 targets, 4 targets. Dontavian Wicks targeted just once last time out, caught it for 17 yards, carried it once for 1 yard. 1 target each of the last 3 games for Dontavian Wicks. Not that involved. So it's really top 2 guys plus their tight end if he plays. And then if you want a 4th receiver, it's probably Aaron Jones in that passing attack. Big yes, pretty reasonable yes, and a dart throw there. And a little Madison is not the worst thing. So I guess we can go to this in probably small doses. Probably a better game for skill players, probably from the passing attacks. Not my favorite game on the board by a long shot. But I'm not going to rush to take out shares if I land on some Cousins plus Addison and Hawkinson. Jordan Love on the other side, I might take a hard look at what those lineups look like. But certainly if I see Watson and Doubs pop up in just random lineups, a Jalen Hurts with Devontae Smith and then Christian Watson's just the second wide receiver in that, I have no issues with that. And it could actually be a good opportunity given how much they're giving up in the passing game, like I was saying. It's just the Jordan Love of it that I'm not wild about. New England, Miami, we only really need to talk about one side of this game because it's going to be a one-sided game. Boy, 2.5 hours into the show, we're making just dynamite puns like that. That's what you hit the like and the subscribe buttons for, gang. 10 o'clock in the east, 7 o'clock out west. We won't spoil anything that happens, West Coast, don't worry. Beantown says Kamara. Yeah, I like Kamara. That's another good call. I do like that New Orleans offense. And like I said, it could just be one of those days where they just load up to Kamara. And, so I definitely want to have him included in my shares where I'm getting to the passing game, just in case it does become that slanted toward the running back type of a day. And he's just a volume monster. He can do it on targets. He can do it on carries. Joel Embiid with a big game, 64. Mobley, 61. Woo! Big Mobley game. Holy hell. Zach LaVine put up a 55 after being questionable all day. Maxey had a day. Karis LeVert had a day. LeVert 50% owned on FanDuel, jeez. Basketball slate, not looking great so far. Still a little ways to go. How much of that late game do I have? Probably not enough. All right, let's keep going. Miami's no secret. That's the team that we're here to talk about in this game. They are going up against a rush defense that ranks first, 3.4 yards per rush attempt, but 13th, 6.3 yards per pass attempt. I do think Raheem Mostert's got more than enough talent to break through that decent rush defense. But really, when we're going to the Dolphins, we want to get to some Tua with Tyreek Hill, some Tua with Jalen Waddle, some Tua with both of those guys. The other options are a mixed bag of, okay plays. You've got your Braxton Berrioses, your Jeff Wilsons, your Ced Wilsons, your Durham Smythes of the world. But it's really these four dudes. And everybody in the world knows that, and everybody in the world will play those guys in this spot. That does not make them unplayable in any way, shape, or form. We do not really care about individual ownership. We do not really care that much about stack ownership because we can still distribute it through different players. We can combine them with different things. There's so many ways to get different with football lineups. So we're not going to worry about any kind of ownership. We're just going to go to Tua, Tyreek Hill, some Mostert, and definitely some Jalen Waddle off the top. And then I'll take some shares of these guys down the board. On the New England side, I really want no part of it. I really don't. Miami ranks in the middle, 3.9 yards per rush attempt, 23rd by passing, but this is a day that this will improve. Mac Jones is no threat. Kendrick Bourne, he doesn't even have good receivers to work with. Kendrick Bourne, not that good. Juju, even worse. Demario Douglas, Devontae Parker. I've said it since week one. These are receivers that I didn't want to play when they were on other teams with better quarterbacks. Just no interest in stacking New England. The one player I was interested in from New England this year was Ramondre, and he has done absolutely nothing this year. He's been really bad through most of the season. Last time out, 9 carries for 34 yards. Did put up 51 yards in the passing game on 6 of 6. But still yet to crack 100 yards combined at any point this season. 2 rushing touchdowns all season, no receiving touchdowns. 6 targets each of the last 2 weeks is encouraging. 5 catches, then 6 catches, but 24 yards, 51 yards. It pads the yardage for us a little bit. He's not crazy expensive, but I don't know. If I have to, I'll take Ramondre gun to my head shares, but that's about it. Tua, 7th and 6th by points. Don't care about the point per dollar. I'll definitely have some. That said, 23rd by point per dollar on DK. It's a little bit alarming. 10th point per dollar on FanDuel is a lot better. Mac Jones, just completely irrelevant. Tua's thrown 15 touchdowns, 6 picks, 7.7 intended air yards, completing 5.4 air yards per attempt, and a monster 9.1 yards per pass attempt. He's thrown the ball 34 times in the red zone. For as good as those backs have been, they throw the ball a decent amount in the red zone. And for the big playability that the receivers have too. They've just gotten 15 sacks on the year. They only gain pressure 17% of the time. Tua should have plenty of time to let plays develop, throw the ball down the field. They've only picked it off 3 times on the season in 6 games, 5 games, whatever they played. 3 picks on the season so far from Miami on the other side. They get a little bit more pressure, fewer sacks overall. They blitz like crazy. And it's Mac Jones again. Going to be running for his life and panicking and not delivering the ball to his receivers. I think the Miami D is a reasonable play here. 3,800, 4,600. I don't know how popular they are. Probably not. I don't want to totally speculate, but probably not crazy popular because they're not like that good a defense. But just with this, the amount that they blitz, a reasonable enough pressure rate, and just some guys who are going to be wearing Dolphins uniforms in the defensive backfield when Mac Jones is running for his life and just throwing the ball to the referee. I don't dislike the idea that Miami could come up with a pick or two, and if they break one and take it for 6, then you're off and running. Do not hate the Miami defense here. 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions so far from Mac Jones. 3.6 air yards per attempt. Woo! Mostert drawing the lion's share of the projection over Jeff Wilson Jr. Wilson, 7 snaps with the offense last time in his season debut. 1 catch on 1 target, no carries. I think it's safe to say it's still Raheem Mostert's backfield. Salvin Ahmed, he was targeted twice, caught one of them for 0 yards. He carried the ball twice for 3 yards, 18 snaps. So he out-snapped Jeff Wilson. He technically out-carried and out-targeted him. But it's all going to Raheem Mostert when they go on the ground right now. 7,700, he ranks as RB7 by points, 23rd by point per dollar, 8th and 17th on FanDuel. He's pricey, but he's talented. Gets targets, 4 targets in the red zone already, 2 receiving touchdowns on the year, 3.2 targets a game, and obviously just tremendously skilled. Ramondre, I don't like that he's actually projecting okay on DK. RB7 by point per dollar because he's only 5,400. With the uptick in the targets, if that is sustained, the idea that he could at least get you 100 combined yards or maybe 80 combined yards, a few catches to pad the DK scoring, I guess maybe you get there. I don't like that play that much though. I would watch my Ramondre Stevenson shares on DK. On FanDuel, it's similar, RB10. But considering that he's only 10th by value and 14th by point per dollar, probably doesn't come up a ton. It's going to come up a lot more on DK, I think. And the same read across sites. I don't like the option. Zeke, I don't like at all. Tyreek Hill, yes please. Projects like a quarterback, priced like a quarterback. Perfectly fine. Totally willing to go to him. WR1 on both sites. FanDuel's pricing can't do anything to stop him from being the WR1 by point per dollar also. 7th by point per dollar on DK despite the quarterback price. Fantastic option. Runs routes on 81% of the snaps that he sees and plays 78% of the snaps. 2.9 yards per route run. Jalen Waddle actually outpacing him, 3.9 yards per route run. That's kind of interesting. Targeted 7 times a game versus Tyreek's 11 targets a game. Tyreek has 7 touchdowns already this season, 119 yards a game. He's less than 100 yards away from 1,000 already in only 7 games, which is just completely bananas. 11.4 yard ADOT, putting up 12.1 yards per target. That's just ridiculous. 9 targets in the red zone. He's dropped the ball 5 times. Leads the team in drops, if you want to negative about Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle, 13th on DK, 14th on FanDuel. Looks better point per dollar by a wide margin on the FanDuel slate at only 7,100. He's more expensive against the lower cap on the DK slate, to put that in perspective. Jalen Waddle's a really interesting buy on FanDuel. 14th by points, 13th by value. I like that a lot. He'll probably be relatively popular because I think people are going to go to this offense, and he'll be the easy pivot away from Tyreek at the price. That said, given the points per dollar driver behind that, I'm perfectly happy to take him even if he's chalky. Barrios, if we want to get into the down depth chart options here a little bit. Get me back to the depth chart. Come on. This depth chart is so weird. Cedric Wilson, Braxton Berrios, Chase Claypool, Robbie Chosen, who used to be Robbie Anderson, if you're not familiar with him. Just another group of guys that are like, yeah, you weren't good on your other teams. Berrios, 2 targets each of the last 3 weeks. Caught all but one of them. Did not crack 20 yards. Not targeted in the red zone at all. He is he's the return man if there's, a little bit of additional value from that maybe. Maybe if you're going to the defense, try and get that double dip. But it's not a great option. Berrios is pretty limited. That's why he ranks 81st and 79th. Ced Wilson, 3 targets last time out, caught 2 of them for 48 yards. Decent yardage total for only 2 catches. No targets in week 6. Week 5, he had 4 targets, caught all 4 of them for 52. A little bit involved. A talented guy. I think he's the guy they want to be the next man up, the WR3 here. So I probably like Ced Wilson a little bit better than Berrios. Claypool got on the field for 4 snaps. Ran 1 route, was not targeted. Robbie Chosen did not play in week 7. Was not targeted in week 5 or week 6, despite running 8 combined routes over those 2 weeks. Did not catch his 1 target in week 4 on 9 routes. Did manage to catch his 1 target in week 3. That was the 68-yarder for a touchdown on the one. He ran 14 routes that week on 41 snaps. By far his season high in snaps. By far his season high in routes. And the only ball he's caught all year. I would not go to Robbie Chosen. Down here, if we've got to go through the New England wide receivers, Kendrick Bourne is the primary and probably the only guy I'm all that interested in here in the passing attack. He had 6 catches, 7 targets, scored a touchdown, 63 yards last week. That was his first touchdown since week 1. He scored 2 touchdowns in week 1. Did have 10 catches in week 6 on 11 targets for 89 yards. But that's probably, that's your ceiling. If you happen to get the touchdown, it becomes a little bit better. But he's so limited by the nature of that offense and by who's throwing him the ball that I don't need to go there. But yeah, if I had to play somebody from the passing game, I know I said my gun to my head option was Ramondre. So if the gun to my head also said, no, you got to take somebody from the passing game, it's Kendrick Bourne. But that's not good. DeMario, 3,300, still lands as wide receiver 50 by point per dollar value, to put it in perspective. Like number 4 on the depth chart there. Had 6 targets last week, caught 4 of them, 54 yards. Didn't play the week before that. 2 targets in week 5, caught 1 of them. Hasn't scored a touchdown. That was the only week that he had more than 2 catches. Oh no, he had 4 catches in week 1 for 40 yards. Pretty thin. Juju didn't play each of the last 2 weeks. Probably won't be out there. Devontae, 1 catch on 1 target last week. 1 catch on 3 targets the week before. 2 for 4 each of the weeks before that. It's so thin. There's just no reason to go to these guys. Mike Gesicki was getting a few looks at the tight end position, but they've also got Hunter Henry. It's not an offense to go to. Miami D. Yeah, Douglas outsnapped Parker and Juju. But again, we're talking about like the 4th option in on the Patriots offense. Let's just go somewhere better. Chuck says each one of the cast members of Friends makes $20 million every year off of residuals, and for him not being able to figure it out is rough. I don't know who you're talking about. Oh, you're talking about Matthew Perry? I assume. I see he almost died of drugs higher up in the chat, so I assume it's about Matthew Perry. He died? Oh, shit. Wow. Drowned in a hot tub? Yep, there it is. Dead at 54. I mean, that was definitely in the mail for all these years. But wow, that's sad. Funny dude. The funeral's going to be weird. That's wild. He wasn't looking too good. If you saw that reunion that they did like during the pandemic or slightly after, that reunion they did for HBO, he was like slurring his speech, didn't really seem too with it. That's a bummer. I always liked Chandler. Yeah, well, moving on. So nothing for me from New England, guys. That's I think I've put enough of a button on that one. 3 to go. How we doing out there? You guys still with us? 15 folks hanging tough out there. I know people catch up with the show overnight. What's up, Larry? I'm sure Larry will be listening at some point. I don't think I've seen him in the chat yet today, but I'm sure Larry will be listening overnight along with some other folks. So hit the like button if you're listening overnight. Hit the like button if you're listening tomorrow morning, or if you're listening right now, hit it. Jump into the Discord. Make sure you're hanging out in Discord. I drop shit in Discord all the time. Just, active, inactive notes. Every now and then we'll put something in Discord that's not up on the site. And I just like the hanging out and chatting when I'm just sitting here at this desk all day, every day. I want to hang out with you guys and talk. I want to make it like the old days at the Stochastic one. There's always like stuff going on, chatter all the time. You could go in there at 3 o'clock in the morning and talk about shitty movies with, what was that dude's name? The guy who ripped off the, whoever that was for $1,000 in that bet. Dr. Miles. Yeah, weird days. But I want to build up the Discord back up a little bit. I know some of you guys came in early, and then some folks bailed, and don't chat and hang out too much, but get in there. Chat, hang out. You get some good info in there as well. Follow the @rotoscouts Twitter handle. Retweet, like, etc., etc., etc. Promos are over. I'm so glad I don't have to just sit here like harping on every couple of minutes. Hit the like button. Buy this. Do that. Maybe one day, but not right now. Arquette doesn't look good either, but it's not drugs. Ouch. Stephen Leibowitz says, maybe I'll jump in Discord. Not a fan of the platform in general. Yeah, I always liked Slack better, but people seem to like Discord. And then we moved the whole Stochastic thing over to Discord. I actually just pulled the trigger on that one night. We had talked about it, and then it was like, well, nobody's actually doing this. So I was just like, fuck it, let me do it. Moved it over without telling anybody. But then I was just in Discord, so when I set this up, I was just like, all right, we'll just stay here. But I actually always liked Slack better. Chuck having an issue with our pal Josh Engelman over at Stochastic, it sounds like. I always like Josh. Got along well with Josh. Got a lot from Josh in terms of things that I learned. I think I shared some stuff with him. I think we helped each other out coming up over the last few years. He's got his strengths, and certainly in basketball is phenomenal. Not a bad thing to say about him, but I understand your perspective, Chuck, from the audience point of view, in terms of the persona, the on-air persona. Not quite like that in reality, in my experience anyway. But yes, the on-air persona can be deliberately abrasive at times for our pal. But yeah, as usual, not a bad word to say about anybody over there. Get a couple beers in me, I'll say a couple bad things about one person at the top. But other than that, I like everybody. All right. Jonathan Taylor off the top. I think Taylor's a reasonable option at the running back position, just because we're kind of dealing with a dearth of running backs this week, and he is an extreme talent when he's getting paid and on the field and available. So presumably a decent option. Michael Pittman, a strong talent at his position. Just, it's what kind of a day do we get out of Gardner Minshew against a defense that's 4th ranked, 5.6 yards per pass attempt, and has been a very good defense against the pass for the last several years. I just habitually don't attack the New Orleans pass defense. So I don't know that I want to do it with Gardner Minshew. And it's Gardner Minshew with Downs is all right. I know he's delivered a couple decent performances, but it's really Gardner Minshew +1. I don't like the tight end options. Pierce is an okay downfield dart throw, but it's kind of thin. So I don't love the Indy passing attack. New Orleans, on the other hand, we can definitely get into. Mid-teens rankings on both sides defensively for Indy. As recently as like 2 weeks ago, they were a little bit better against the run. And keep in mind, we're talking about if this was like 3.6, it would probably drop to like 5th, right? So we're talking about 0.2 of a yard per attempt. So a lot of this does get a little bit meaningless at a certain point, but we've got to hang our hat on something with football. So I think there's plenty of opportunity here for the New Orleans attack. I probably prefer them through the air, though, as good as Kamara is. And that's all right. With any normal human running back who didn't get 30 touches in some weeks, I would prefer them through the air. I do give Kamara that credit, though, for being just an incredible talent and a volume beast. So call it a tie between the passing game, which Kamara's involved in anyway, and the rushing game here. But I do like the New Orleans side. I like the fact that he's got two, assuming Thomas plays, two very good 1A type of wide receivers, and then guys like Juwan Johnson at the tight end position, Rashid Shaheed, who's having a nice little year and has had a couple good weeks as a downfield option. If Thomas doesn't go, I like the idea of Shaheed stepping up and taking a few more opportunities. Where the ball goes outside of that, if Thomas doesn't go, becomes interesting. They got multiple tight end options, obviously. The Taysom Hill wild card, multiple position Taysom Hill, Foster Moreau and Jimmy Graham also lurking in that tight end role, and then Johnson. So there's plenty of directions the ball could go toward those big bodies. In terms of the wide receiver depth chart, Keith Kirkwood down board. Who else is on this, even on this depth chart? There's got to be a couple other names here. Lynn Bowden and A.T. Perry. Lynn Bowden has seen one target all season. It came in week 4. A.T. Perry has not been on the field yet this season. So if Thomas doesn't go, it just becomes a little bit more zeroed in around Kamara, Olave, a stepped up Shaheed, and then probably Johnson is your underappreciated guy in that scenario. I could see Juwan Johnson being kind of interesting here, going a little bit under-owned for the money at 3,000 on the DK board especially. That's not bad. Minshew rates out 24th and 26th on the DK board, but Derek Carr gives you number 4 and the first rated quarterback by point per dollar because he's putting up a monster projection for the money. 4th by point per dollar on the FanDuel board. I like him a lot over there as well. Going up against a defense allowing 6.5 yards per pass attempt, 230 yards a game, 7 touchdowns so far on the season. They've only managed 13 sacks despite a 32% blitz rate. That's not very good. 6 interceptions. I think Derek Carr is going to have an opportunity to do what he wants out there. He's completing 64% of his passes for 225 yards a game, 6 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, but he was limited, let's keep in mind, by that shoulder injury for like 3 weeks in there. Not able to throw the ball downfield, so really hampered his overall total numbers. I think Derek Carr's got plenty of ability left in him. Minshew on the other side, 187 yards a game. That's the defense. 197 yards a game. He's thrown 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. 7.1 intended air yards per attempt, 3.9. They're both completing 3.9, but the intended air yards are strongly in favor of Derek Carr, even with the shoulder issue. 6.3 yards per attempt completed. They've both thrown 4 picks. Significantly more volume on Carr's side as well, if you're going just for the head-to-head. 36 passing attempts a game versus 26. Kamara basically takes most of the value away from anybody else involved in that backfield. There's always the lurking possibility of Jamal just smashing his way in for 2 touchdowns. 3 carries, 2 touchdowns kind of a day. But I don't think we can sweat it too much. And even if he does that, Kamara could still get there. Got 5 red zone targets already on the season. He's receiving a ridiculous 9.75 targets per game out of the backfield. That's supported by, 14 targets the first week he came back? But still, that's a lot of targets for a running back. In the 4 games, 14 targets, 3 targets, 8 targets, and then 14 targets again. In week 4, he caught 13 of 14. In week 7, he caught 12 of 14. He also carried the ball 17 times. That's just stupid. That's so many touches. Oh, God, I'm not going to be able to get away from Alvin Kamara. I'm going to have a lot of Alvin Kamara, I think, guys. Going up against the defense, giving up 1.7 rushing touchdowns per game. 118 yards, 3.8 yards per rush attempt. Oh, this might be Alvin Kamara day for me. I hope it comes through because I think I'm going to, as we're looking into this more and more, I think I'm going to end up with a lot of Alvin Kamara. Hopefully the field draws in that direction as well. And then anything that you do with the passing game for New Orleans becomes a little bit less crazy popular just because the field goes to Kamara. I have no idea how that's going to work out. I haven't looked at ownership at all. Considering how he rates points per dollar for 73 and 83, he'll probably gain some speed though, or some steam in ownership. Taylor and Moss, a little bit more of a split situation, but I think we see Taylor picking up increasing workload as that rolls along. Let me just get to the totals last week for him. Oh, and Moss banged up. That's right. Moss questionable with an elbow. Did not practice on Friday. Limited practice on Thursday. I don't really love it. I think it supports the idea that Taylor takes off a little bit this week in terms of the touches. Probably gains a little bit of separation. Last week, 18 carries already on 18 carries, 75 yards and a touchdown. Caught 3 of 4 passes for another 45 yards. I think it's safe to say Taylor's back. Especially with Moss banged up. Especially if he doesn't play. Obviously, I think that only significantly enhances the Taylor play. But even if Moss suits up, I kind of like it to go in Taylor's direction pretty strongly here. 8th and 4th on DK, 7th and 3rd on FanDuel. 3.5 yards per rush attempt so far in his limited action. Targeted almost 4 times a game. Already been targeted 3 times in the red zone too. That's just on touchdown equity in the passing game. That's interesting. Yes and yes on that. What did Jamal do touches wise? I wonder if Jamal Williams regrets. He signed there as a free agent, right? I wonder if he regrets that. He's been banged up, so I mean, he didn't really get the opportunity to do much. He missed 4 weeks in there. But came back to 5 carries for 14 yards, ran 7 routes, wasn't targeted in week 7. I just think not the right spot. Unless they promised him a lot of opportunities to score touchdowns. But after the year he had last year, I don't know. Not the right spot to put yourself behind a guy who touches the ball 25 times at your position. Colts passing attack. Pittman. Downs kind of took a step forward. 125? 125 and a touchdown last week. 5 catches the week before, only 21 yards and a touchdown. That was his first 100 plus game. Had a 97-yard game on 6 catches in week 5. So really kind of coming on over the last 3 weeks. Pittman, just 2 catches, but 83 yards and a touchdown last week. 5 targets. 9 of 14 the week before, 109 yards, no touchdown. Had a touchdown in week 1 on 8 catches, but his target shares are ridiculous. 11, 12, 11, 5 and 7 in the middle in weeks 4 and 5, then back to 14, and then back down to 5 against Cleveland last time out. Plenty of opportunity. Alec Pierce. Targeted 3 times, caught all 3 of them for 53 yards. 17.7 yards per target in the last game. Not bad. A pretty significant A-dot as well, I believe. 16-yard A-dot. Definitely a downfield weapon, drawing 4 targets a game. If you're throwing darts at the Indy passing game, you definitely want to include some Alec Pierce. He's got that big play upside. He's the home run threat in that offense. You can see it just in the average depth of target between him and Downs and Pittman. He's the guy sprinting down the field. Ogletree, Mo Alley Cox, I don't really need to get into the tight end situation here. I don't really think there's a ton to like there. And then the New Orleans passing attack. Definitely, as referenced several times, significant interest in that one. So again, Thomas, questionable. Does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into it. But Chris Olave, 10 targets in week 6, 15 targets in week 7, caught 7 of them in each week, 96 yards in week 6, 57 yards in week 7. Just 1 touchdown on the season, only 200-yard games, but throwing a third, called the 96-yarder, a 100-yarder. I know we didn't get any kind of bonuses for it, but you'll love the target shares. He had 6 targets in week 4 and 5 targets in week 5. Every other week has been over 10 targets. 10, 11, 11, 6 and 5, 10, and then the 15 is his season high. But they're throwing the ball toward him a ton, and he's got plenty of talent. Looks in the red zone. 3 targets in the red zone last week. Didn't come away with a touchdown, but 3 targets in the red zone. Just 1 in week 5, none in week 6. But they definitely call his number when they get in close. Thomas also gets looks in the red zone. There he is. Thomas also had 3 last week. 3 targets in the red zone last week, 1 the week before. He scored last week, 3 catches for 42 yards, his first touchdown of the season. But he's been involved. Even though he's not been falling into the end zone, no week with fewer... Actually, last week with the 3 catches was his fewest catches of the season. 7 targets. He's had no fewer than 6 targets. That came in week 4. 2 games with 7 targets. Everything else, 8 or 9. They still look Michael Thomas's way a ton. If he's on the field, you go to him. Rashid Shaheed, 28 yards on 4 of 8. Not great in terms of the ratio of targets to catches, only 28 yards. But before that, the week before, 2 catches on 6 targets, 85 yards and a touchdown. Had a big week 1, 5 catches, 89 yards and a touchdown. A reasonable, cheap, low-owned guy if Thomas is in as a potential pivot in that offense or a potential second man as a Derek Carr +2. If Thomas doesn't play, that makes Rashid Shaheed more interesting. But as is, 16.2 yard A-dot. That is a significant downfield target. Olave and Thomas both also operate down the field. But that's a big home run option. Juwan missed each of the last 4 weeks. Prior to going out, though, the first 3 weeks of the season, 5, then 3, then 4 targets. Handful of catches. 7 total catches on those targets. Not that much to speak of in terms of yardage. No touchdowns on the season. Last year, 42 catches, 508 yards, and most interestingly, 7 touchdowns. Juwan Johnson, probably a little bit of a sleeper at the tight end position here. 3,000 on the DK board. Wide receiver 10. Even if he gives you like this, you're not dead in the water. And he's got upside beyond that. 15th and 14th on FanDuel for 4,500. Not as good looking, but still playable, and definitely playable in stacks of Saints. If you guys are into the Taysom Hill thing, I think you can roll those dice. He's also questionable. Friday practice was limited for Taysom Hill, chest injury. I could see it going to, all right, Taysom, take the week off. You gave us a little bit over the last couple, and Juwan's back, so take a week off. But he's been involved recently. He's only thrown 3 passes on the season. He had 5 carries last week for 18 yards and a touchdown. 3 carries in week 5 for 19 yards. 4 carries, 9 carry peak in week 2. And then this doesn't have his targets because everything's occupied by his passing and rushing numbers. Largest target, here you go. It's in the notes. 7 and 5 targets each of the last 2 weeks. So they were looking in his direction a little bit while Johnson was out. But with him banged up, with Johnson coming back, I don't think we go that direction all that often. Projects out okay. Still some lingering opportunity there. But especially when Johnson's $1,000 cheaper on DK, I think you just go to that option. $1,500 cheaper on FanDuel. I think you just go to that option. And then Moreau, Jimmy Graham, they're just not going to get enough volume, really. I like this game bigly. Definitely interested in these 4 guys. Definitely interested in their running back and this running back. These 3 guys aren't bad. I just don't love the Minshew part of it. It's the weak link. We've seen Minshew succeed. He's not incapable at the quarterback position, but I greatly prefer Derek Carr. It really swings on Carr. If you took Carr and put him on the other side, granted they're going up against the better pass defense, but I'd probably be saying like, I kind of like Derek Carr and his receiving weapons, and I don't like the Minshew, what he's going to do to the Saints. I think the whole thing hinges on Derek Carr here. But this is a game I'll have a fair amount of. This is a game we could honestly skip entirely. Speaking as a Giants fan. Saquon and Breece Hall are probably the 2 most interesting options in this game. Followed by Garrett Wilson and Garrett Wilson and Garrett Wilson and Garrett Wilson. And that's just basically about it. There's really not that much here. I like Tyrod Taylor better than I like Daniel Jones. I think he's shown more over the last couple of weeks while he's been playing. There's word in the New York Rags that he might get the rest of the season because Daniel Jones might be out the rest of the season. That said, I don't think I want to go to him here. Doesn't project out great. Jets defense, I think, is a little bit underrated, particularly against the pass. 16th and 13th on DK, 15th across the board on FanDuel. Zach Wilson fares no better on the other side, 21st and 14th, 21st and 22nd. They're both going up against defenses that allowed 8 passing touchdowns on the season, a little bit more than one per game. Jets defense, 15 sacks, 8 picks. Giants defense, 19 sacks, 4 picks. Their sack totals come up over the last couple of weeks. I'll give the Giants that much credit. Remember the other day they only had like, what was it, like 5? So the sack total's gone up, but it's not a very good defense, but Zach Wilson is a pretty bad quarterback. 182 yards a game, 60% of his passes completed on 30 attempts. Tyrod only throwing the ball 13 times a game. In his limited action, he does have 2 touchdown passes. So in his limited opportunities, he's got half the touchdown passes that Zach Wilson does, and he's got 5 fewer interceptions because he's got 0 and Zach's got 5. 8 intended air yards per attempt for Tyrod, 7.4 for Zach. Don't really care about the rushing attempts for either one of these guys. Breece Hall, pretty solid projection going up against a pretty inept Giants defense. They rank 24th against the run. No, 29th against the run. 5 yards per rush attempt. That's pretty bad. 21st against the pass. 6.8 yards per pass attempt. But again, Zach Wilson throwing the ball. So give me some Breece. 4th and 1st on DK. 5th and 1st on FanDuel. So I guess we can't skip this game entirely. Breece, over the last 2 weeks since they came out and said they were taking the handcuffs off, 22 carries that first week against Denver, 177 yards and a touchdown. Caught 3 of 3 for 17 more yards.
Follow that up against Philly, only 12 carries, 39 yards and a touchdown, caught 5 of 5 for 54. So put up 90 plus and a touchdown combined and touched the ball 17 times. A little bit of a downtick, but going up against Philly in that game wasn't the greatest spot to feed the running back the ball. I think this spot against the Giants, I could see him popping back up to 20 plus touches and easily cruising past 100 yards, probably getting in the end zone. So I like the Breece Hall play quite a bit. 5,900 is a great price. 7,200 is a highly playable price. Point per dollar is first, obviously. Saquon, 6th but 20th point per dollar on DK because he cost 8,000. 6th and 9th on FanDuel for 81 is a little bit better. There's not much to say about Saquon. He's easily the best player on this team. Missed weeks 3 through 5. Came back, carried the ball 24 times. And then caught 4 of 5 passes in week 6. Followed that up with 21 rushing attempts and 3 of 4 through the air in week 7. 93 yards on the ground in that first game back in week 6. And then last week, over 100 combined yards and scored a touchdown in the passing game. Just on the idea that the Giants offense looks a little bit better with Tyrod out there. I think Saquon gains a little ground over where we were looking at him earlier in the year. So he's playable. He's my favorite part of that Giants offense. I'm not going to go crazy going out of my way for him. I think I'll get to him pretty naturally, especially on FanDuel where he ranks out okay. If I was playing DK, if he's crazy low owned, I think it's probably worth pushing a few chips his direction. But if he's gaining any kind of popularity given the points per dollar, it's not a spot where you have to force it by any means. Plenty of options is not necessarily correct because I was already ranting earlier about the lack of running back options. And he's a star caliber running back, but doesn't rate out all that great. And then the passing attack from the Giants is just miserable. Wandale's the nominal number 1 for 3,700. He ranks 19th point per dollar on DK, but 46th by actual points. 42nd across the board on FanDuel. Thankfully, nobody relevant on the FanDuel slate. Even Darren Waller ranks 6th by points, but not with a huge projection by any means. 11th by point per dollar. 6th and 18th on DK for 52. And he hasn't really been all that good. 7 targets a game. 1 touchdown so far this season. 8.4 yard ADOT. 76 yards a game. Targeted just 4 times in the red zone in 7 games. This is not what they brought Darren Waller here to do. Plays plenty of snaps. He's out there running routes, playing snaps. Targeted on 30% of the routes that he ran. Put up 3.6 yards per route run last week. That was a decent total. What did he do in the overall? Eight targets, 7 catches, 98 and a touchdown. That was his best game as a Giant. But yeah, it's pretty limited. I do like the step forward that he'll also take with Tyrod throwing him the ball, though. I think that is a benefit to Darren Waller that he can work with a capable quarterback and a veteran quarterback. Jalen Hyatt's been a little bit more involved with Tyrod out there as well. So I think he takes a little bit of a step forward if you have to go to Giants. He's got that downfield ability. That was the note on him coming into the year. It never really materialized with Danny Dimes. He was targeted 5 times last week, 4 times the week before that. By far his highest target games. His targets before that were 1, 2, 0, 2, 0. And then Tyrod took over and he caught 3 of 4 for 21 yards the first week and then caught 2 of 5, but 75 yards. He's the downfield weapon, alleged weapon. If he happens to catch one and actually hang on to it and actually bring it into the end zone for a change, you get a little bit of productivity out of it for cheap. This is a very, very low priority option. 52nd and 41st on FanDuel. 57th and 12th, though, on DK because he only costs 3,100. DK's got some problems with some of these value plays. I don't love it. It would be these 3 guys if I'm stacking Giants. And then you're really just throwing darts with any of these other guys. Slayton is the next man up in terms of the target volume for the course of the season. Hodgins really has fallen off. He was the favored weapon for Danny Jones down the stretch last year and got some red zone opportunities, but has not done much at all this year and doesn't project well at all. Bellinger, very, very limited, like 1 target per game. Darren Waller is banged up, though. So if Waller doesn't go, Bellinger maybe becomes a little bit more interesting for 2,500, 4,400 on FanDuel. But we're talking about a very narrow path to success. He's seen 4 targets all year. 1 each in weeks 1, 3, 4, and 5. He caught them all. He has not put up more than 10 yards in a game. Hasn't gotten in the end zone. Hasn't been targeted in the red zone. Last year, 30 catches, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns. I do think that Daniel Bellinger would need Darren Waller to not play to see any kind of opportunity to succeed. Waller's dealing with a hamstring. According to ESPN, Giants have confidence that he'll be available. But he is a limited participant in practices Wednesday through Friday, and he is dealing with a hamstring and officially questionable. Seems like he's going to go. Garrett Wilson, the only guy I'm interested in from the Jets receiver core. Alan Lazard has been a little bit more productive of late. Randall Cobb's banged up anyway and hasn't been good. Garrett Wilson, 12 targets last week, caught 8 of them for 90 yards. 7 targets the week before, caught 3 of them for 54. 14 targets in week 4, caught 9 of them for 60 yards. You can just feel the Zach Wilson of it in these numbers. With 9 catches on 14 targets, a receiver like Garrett Wilson should have more than 60 yards. But he didn't. A lot of red zone opportunities, though. At least 1 red zone target every week. Increasing as the season's gone on. 1 each of the first 2 weeks, 2 each of the next 2 weeks, and then 3 each of these last 2 weeks. Easily the top priority in that passing game. 12th overall by points on DK, 25th by point per dollar, 15th and 16th on FanDuel. Lazard, 3 targets last week, caught 1 of them for 8 yards. Scored his touchdown in week 4, caught 3 of 3 for 61 yards, caught 3 of 4 for 33 yards in week 5 at Denver against that terrible Denver D. And that's the guy I was saying is the second best option in that passing attack. It's Garrett Wilson, it's Breece Hall. A little bit of Saquon. That's about it. Eventually, Wilson's going to get back in the end zone. Presumably, he'll put up a 100-yard day at some point. If he keeps on getting targeted as much, he's going to have to go over 100 yards at some point. He hasn't gotten there yet this season. But a ridiculous amount of targets and just too much talent, even with the bad quarterback. Too much talent to be kept down all year. So you got to keep going to it. And the week that you hit it, it'll pay off nicely. Against this terrible Giants defense, even with Zach throwing them the ball, it could be this week. I don't want to undersell the opportunity for the Jets just because their quarterback is terrible. This is a good spot for their offense in every other aspect. But it's really only on 2 guys. A couple Tyler Conklins, maybe, if you are crazy and stacking Zach Wilson. I probably prefer Conklin to Alan Lazard even. A little bit cheaper on DK. A little bit cheaper on FanDuel also. Dalvin apparently looking to demand a trade. Not getting the role that he thought he would be getting here. Or just not playing with Aaron Rodgers, rather. It's one or the other. Cobb, no. Carter, no. Nobody down board. If I'm ranking it, it's 1. Probably 2, 3. Those are really the only guys. 4 would be here. I do think that the Giants' depth receivers, I'd rather have Wandale, Hyatt. Slayton is debatable. But I think I'd rather have Wandale and Hyatt with the uptick in opportunities to any of the guys after Zach Wilson. Or after Garrett Wilson. Let's get out of this game. Let's talk about a good game and end this show. Chuck Deuces, Mac Jones, sleeper game tomorrow. 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 rushing. 4 touchdown day from Mac Jones. My friend, that is not a bold call. That is the hot take of the week. New feature on the show. Chuck Deuces, hot take of the week. Mac and Jones going for 4 TDs. You play that, that'll win you a slate, my friend. I'll tell you right now, that's a slate winner right there if it happens. Vic says Hall, hand, green, crystal ball. I don't know what you're going for there. I'm sure it was relevant like a half hour ago when you typed that, Vic, but I lost track of what that might have been referencing. Last one up, Jalen Hurts. Love the spot. Monster projection, QB1. I think. Let me get back to it. Pretty sure he was QB1 by points. Yep, QB1 by points, 5th by value on DK, 1st and 2nd on the FanDuel slate. Tons and tons of potential there. Like I said at the top, I do kind of like Washington to hold up their end of the bargain here. They've got enough weapons on that team. It really all comes down to the quarterback. However Howell ends up playing, I think really drives whatever happens with this team, drives their ability to keep this one tight. They played in week 4. We liked that game a little bit. We were talking about the Commanders' ability to keep it tight in that one, and it ended up a 34-31 Eagles victory in overtime. Commanders hung in 17 points in the first half. They were winning the first half 17-10. Philly came out with 11 points in the third. Washington answered with 14 in the fourth, but gave up 10. And then Philly kicked a field goal to win it in overtime. But 62 regulation points out of this game the last time they played, just a few weeks ago. That was in Philly. So home game for the Commanders. Maybe they see a little bit of an uptick from the home field advantage and so on and so forth. All of that was just to illustrate that I think they can actually hang in this game. I'm not that worried. I think it supports the idea of the Philly stack, if nothing else. I think you could probably get a little bit of sneaky Sam Howell, Terry McLaurin, Sam Howell, Jahan Dotson type plays. I don't love it against Philly's D. But at worst, I think they're in the game. Philly ranking 5th, 3.6 yards per rush attempt, 7.6 yards per pass attempt. If I am going to the Washington side, I think I lean more into the passing game with the Howell and those receiver combinations that I was just reading off. And by the way, Curtis Samuel, not uninteresting as their slot receiver. Logan Thomas, a fairly interesting tight end option. Even Diami Brown as a dart throw in super large field. Not the craziest option in the world for a share or two. Antonio Gibson in the passing game. There's a decent amount to support. That's what I was saying. The talent kind of supports Sam Howell a little bit. He's in a better situation than some of the other mediocre young quarterbacks out there. And then just all the talent in the world on this side of the ball. Jalen, one of the top QBs in the entire league, if not the actual top QB in the entire league, just based on his ability to get the ball in the end zone, if nothing else. But a dynamic thrower, a very good runner. He's got great weapons to work with. Solid 1-1A in AJ and Devonta. He's got a good running back with DeAndre Swift, a very good tight end in Dallas Goedert. He's got a good defense on his side that I think you can use for fantasy purposes here. Much as I do think Washington can hang in this game, that doesn't take me away from the Philly defense play. They project out great. Kenny Gainwell, I don't think we really go to. OZ, Julio Jones, you're throwing darts at whichever one of them comes down with the ball in the end zone. But there's not total lack of opportunity there. There's not a total lack of talent there. I don't think we're going to any Britton Coveys or Boston Scotts or Jack Stoles or anybody like that. Jalen going up against the defense, allowing 250 yards a game, giving up 14 touchdowns to the quarterback position already on the season. They do have 23 sacks, but he's got pretty solid escapability, and he's got a very good offensive line in front of him. So I'm not really worried about the pressure or the sacks, and Jalen's seen pressure before. They've only picked off 5 passes this year. Philly's D's only picked off 3, only got 12 sacks, gaining 20% pressure. Again, just little things like that support the idea that Howell can kind of stand tall in the pocket, do his thing. He's throwing the ball 36 times a game. They're not shy about throwing the ball. 9 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Jalen significantly better. He's throwing the ball 35 times a game, 260 yards. Matching 9 touchdown totals, though. Jalen's technically thrown 1 more interception than Howell has. 7.5 yards per pass attempt, 8.9 intended versus 7.9 intended air yards. And then you've got the obvious major differentiator back here in that Jalen runs the ball 10 times a game. 3.7 yards per rush attempt, and 6 touchdowns on the ground. They can pick him up and throw him over the pile into the end zone. That's what I want to see in the future. If they ban the tush push / brotherly shove play, I want to see a team sign a little person and use him just as a gadget play. And you hand him the ball and you literally pick him up and throw him. Why not? I don't think that's being offensive, right? It's basically what they're doing with Jalen, picking him up and carrying him in over the pile. We're just taking it a step further. If they ban the push, nobody banned picking a guy up and throwing him. You just need a guy that's small enough. So either we need a running back that is like 350 pounds who can lift, like just deadlift and throw like 250 pounds, or we need a little person that can be the guy who gets thrown. I'm sure there's some little people out there who want that job. It's not like, Wolf of Wall Street throwing him at a target. Like we're in the NFL. I think that's reasonable. Obviously being a little bit facetious. Hopefully not offending any of our little people, viewers out there. I didn't mean to. DeAndre Swift, pretty solid projection, RB10 by points and value, 12th and 11th on the FanDuel board. Going up against a defense allowing 125 yards a game on the ground, but only 0.5, only a half a touchdown a game. But plenty of yardage available there. 68% of the snaps last time out, 14.3 rushing attempts per game, 5.1 yards per rush attempt. Only two rushing touchdowns on the season. He's got one in the receiving game, draws 4.5 targets a game. The number one primo running back in this one. Robinson in a little bit of a split with Antonio Gibson. Gibson draws more of the action in the pass game. Last time out, Robinson carried the ball just 8 times, 23 yards, scored a touchdown, 10 carries the week before that. Targeted just twice and once in those games. Gibson, just 3 carries and 2 carries in those games. Targeted just once and twice. 6 targets in week 5, caught 4 of them for 64 yards. His peak this season was 6 carries in week 4. So really just out there for passing downs. But it takes away enough opportunity from Robinson and going up against enough of a defense that's why I was saying I just kind of want to get more invested in the Washington passing attack if I'm going to Washington. Don't love the rushing game here. I think Robinson's a talented guy, but I don't love the split and the impact it has on any of these numbers. For what it's worth, he is putting up 3.8 yards per rush attempt. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns on the season, 12 carries a game, 46 yards. Again, plenty of talent, but just with a few touches going Antonio Gibson's direction and getting away from him and then going up against a decent D, I don't love it. AJ, wide receiver 4. Smith, wide receiver 8. Goddard, tight end 5. 3, 8, and 5 on FanDuel. Excellent ratings, point per dollar on FanDuel. A little bit of slippage for the 2 expensive receivers on the DK board, 13th and 26th. But we don't care. At that point, we don't care. We're just grabbing Jalen's pass catchers to go with Jalen stacks. Obviously, OZ and Julio don't rate out all that well. If either one of them happens to get the right opportunity, they'll come down with the ball and a deep pass into the end zone or catch 2 or 3 passes with one of them being a medium-sized pass into the end zone. You're not far off for 3,000, 3,200. Neither one of these guys is a likely candidate, but either one of these guys in that kind of a scenario for these kind of prices would immediately elevate a lineup if that happened. So I think they are playable dart throws. Limited shares, though. I mean, I don't think we need to go completely haywire trying to get shares of Zacchaeus and ancient Julio Jones. What did Julio get last time out? Julio got 1 target, ran 10 routes, 16 snaps. He caught it 3 yards. In that same game, OZ had 1 target that he did not catch, but he ran 22 routes, 38 snaps. He's out there more. Not targeted more, but he's out there running more. So if you're looking for guys out there doing wind sprints, guys with pretty good cardio, Zacchaeus might be your guy. But again, either one of those guys, I do think there's opportunity there. And then Goddard, a premium tight end option. They're allowing 248 yards and 2 touchdowns a game through the air, by the way. Just tons and tons of support for this Philly play. Goddard last time out, 2.9 yards per route run, 6 targets a game on the season, putting at 1.5 yards per route run overall on the season. He's got 2 touchdowns, targeted a significant amount in the red zone, 7 targets to lead the team in the red zone, 5 targets for A.J. Brown, just 2 for Smith, 2 for OZ, but significantly playable, 3 top options, and then a couple good dart throws. On the deep receiving core on the Washington side, I just like this passing attack in terms of the talent in this receiving core. Terry McLaurin, the downfield operator with an 11-yard ADOT. And then, as I mentioned, Diami Brown as a just home run hitter, going to see maybe 1 or 2 targets, but they'll be down the field significantly. I don't think Diami Brown's off the board. But if you're looking for volume, you're looking at McLaurin, you're looking at Dotson. 7 targets a game for McLaurin, 6 apiece for Dotson and Samuel, 5 for the tight end Logan Thomas. So essentially they're all getting similar kind of opportunities. They catch the ball in different areas of the field. They do different things after they catch it. It's just a good overall passing attack. Going up against a Philly team allowing 1.7 touchdowns through the air, 227 yards a game, an 8.7 yard defensive ADOT, 9.7 on the other side. There's a good chance these quarterbacks are going to be throwing the ball downfield. We could see some big play opportunities here. This game is pretty ripe for fantasy scoring. McLaurin's got 4 targets in the red zone. Dotson's got 6. Samuel's got 7. Thomas has 4. They throw the ball a lot when they get down close. 4 targets in the red zone for Cole Turner. Target apiece for Diami and John Bates. Everybody down here you're not really overly concerned with. Bates and Turner as backup tight ends, saw a little bit with when Thomas was out, but nothing really to get to there. Byron Pringle, has he done anything on this team? I sincerely doubt it, given where he is on the depth chart, and I don't remember saying his name at all this year. It's so weird where these guys land. Like, just the mix of some of these players on some of these teams, like Diami Brown, Byron Pringle, Jamison Crowder on this team also, down depth chart. That New England passing attack, like those guys all feel like the same. Granted, we're talking about a number of ex-Chiefs in those. Pringle, just 4 snaps each of the last 2 weeks. 1 target total over the last 2 weeks. 5 routes run total. Caught the 1 target for 16 yards. 4 total catches all season. Call it 31, 41, 45 yards total. Not great. Has not run more than 10 routes in any game this season. Has not been targeted more than twice in any game this season. But he has been out there every game. I guess I wasn't paying attention to that far down the depth chart for the Washington Commanders. But yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I probably go Thomas over Samuel. Considering they get similar targets, and I would just take the cheaper tight end more often there. But I don't dislike Samuel. And then Diami Brown is a dart throw. So there are significant fantasy options available on the Washington side of things here. At the very least, there's enough support with McLaurin's talent, Dotson, the volume that these guys get, that you can play any one of these 3 guys as a run back play against a Philly stack. And I wouldn't be reluctant to play Logan Thomas in that role either. Some tight ends I take out of that. A lot of running backs I take out of that. The run back play, going against the primary stack. But in Thomas's case, there's enough opportunity, I think. And he's cheap. You're not burning much salary to get to him. And he's got red zone looks. Been a reliable tight end over the last couple seasons when he's healthy. Doesn't rate out great, 19th and 22nd on both sides. I probably do like Curtis Samuel a little bit better. But considering, the positional difference and the discount, I probably do end up with a little bit more Logan Thomas just in what ends up in lineups. Would depend on the ownership probably, though. Man, my stomach is rumbling. I don't know if you guys can hear that on the microphone, but I am getting hungry. Steve Leibowitz says, if this is your 2-hour show, we're all going to live to 175 as we're 3 hours in. 3.5 hours. Yeah, Look, I intended to talk fast, but there's a lot to talk about. And we did go pretty far down the depth chart on a lot of these things. But we are at the end. At the end of a long show. I can go check my basketball lineups that I'm assuming did not come back and win. But yeah, one more time on the stacks board. Basically, everybody above green line and above, fairly high priority stacks. Again, a lot of obvious teams this week where it's not a ton of great value options. It's not a ton of like, ooh, look at this team against a really bad team. That team for me this week is Houston. I should put the green line on Houston just because they are the extreme value stack this week. So I'll do that. But I do like the idea of all these teams can't be highly owned. There are going to be some opportunities across these teams. And you're talking about some of the very best teams in the league with Philly, Miami, KC, San Francisco, the Rams offense anyway, Cincinnati's offense, Dallas's offense, to a lesser extent, New Orleans. But I like all of these teams. Like these are teams that I would go to for the most part anyway, in a vacuum. Like don't even tell me who the opponent is kind of a week, play it blind kind of a thing. Just hand me the app. Don't show me the opponents and I get to pick players from these teams. These are naturals. These are teams that you just go to. So the fact that they're rated out really well, and you can't get everybody. The field can't get everybody. There's going to be some opportunities here. After we pass the green line, I think Minnesota is playable, but not great. I don't really like the Jets outside of the two individuals, Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. I don't really like Seattle going up against Cleveland, but again, another spot where there are talented individuals in Kenny Walker and the two primary receivers. Atlanta's similar in that they have some very, very good skill players, but I don't like them as a stack. So I think we're really, from these three games, probably drawing one-offs. From this game, I think you probably stack. Everything from here up is stacks. Everything down below the yellow line, I don't really need that much of. I'll take smatterings of any of the indie skill players. Some Saquon for sure. Maybe a little bit of the Pittsburgh and Green Bay receiving core. Thielen, where he's cheap. Washington, yes. Washington's the wild card down here. That's probably the other stack, the downboard stack that I get to. I don't really think I get much Cleveland at all. Tennessee, New England, Arizona. I don't think I get to any of that. Denver, I probably don't get much of. Carolina, I don't get much of. So yeah, like outside of the popular / good teams, I think Houston and Washington are interesting. And Atlanta's probably a little interesting. At least for one-offs. And these three teams are interesting for one-offs. Everybody up here is where I'm focused on stacks. Greg says we could talk about movies for a while or dwarves, or we could talk about both if you talk about the beginning of The Wolf of Wall Street. I got to get out to see Killers of the Flower Moon. I got to find 4 hours in a day one of these days to get out and see that. Heard it's very, very good. Monster Scorsese fan. That's not really saying all that much. If you don't like Martin Scorsese, it's not Martin Scorsese's fault. It's your fault. Let's put it that way. He's putting out some delightful TikTok videos I saw with his granddaughter, I assume. Him and some Rubenesque 20-year-old. I didn't want to call her chubby or fat. She's a larger girl. Seemed very nice. Seemed like they were having a blast on the one TikTok video that I saw. I saw it on Twitter, not on TikTok. I don't have TikTok. You guys TikTokers? Working with the Chinese government? Such a ridiculous thing. Flower Moon is 3.5 but 4 hours when we count the previews, I think, yeah. But yeah, just a long haul of a movie. Scorsese said, oh, you guys like that Irishman one that I made, huh? That was 3 hours. I'm going to add another hour to that. Yeah, I can't wait to see that one. Anyway, I think we're going to probably check out. It's also warm in here. 80-degree day in late October here in Jersey. Beantown says, if you were to throw a dart, which of the three, Powell, Noah Brown, or Julio? I only throw one dart at that? I don't know. I might be crazy and take the Julio one, to be honest. I know he's been washed, but I kind of can't quit him. But that's really just bias creeping in. There's no real good answer there. I do like the Brown idea. I want to give you a better answer than that. Noah projects out a little bit better. I do like that spot. That's probably the right answer. Julio was just, 3 and change. And who's your other guy? Powell? Powell actually projects the best. Possibly the best path to targets, too. Six, 4, and 5 targets each of the last 3, 4, 3, and 4 catches. Handful of yardage. Hasn't gotten in the end zone. You might have a little bit more touchdown upside, like dart throw touchdown upside. But if you're just hunting, if you're hunting for some security of just targets and involvement, it's probably Powell. And then on the Brown side, I do like that offense, like I've said numerous times through the show. He had 5 targets in the return to action last week, caught 2 of them, 37 yards, 4 targets back in week 1. That was without Tank Dell, too. That's right. Tank's coming back, but Robert Woods is stepping out. Yeah, with the idea that it'll probably be the 3. I should probably not have overcomplicated this much and just given you Brown off the top. Because that's going to be the spot I think that I own the most out of those. Like, I'll have more Philly, but I'll have less Philly with Julio. Where I'll have not as much Houston as Philly, but I'll have a significant share of Houston. And I'm willing to bet that Noah Brown winds up in more of those Houston lineups than Julio winds up in my Philly lineups. So with that in mind, and with the idea that he's got the opportunity to be at worst the 3 with Nico and Tank and potentially the 2, I'll go Noah Brown for 3,000. Meandered our way around to that one. Stephen Leibowitz says Powell by 1.5 over Brown on Stochastic. That's fine. Both are negatively leveraged. That's also fine. Don't really care. Individual leverage, individual ownership. Don't really sweat it. Play the full lineup leverage, the full lineup combinations. It's all about the combinations. You can have a lineup with tons and tons of high-owned guys and 2 guys that are just a little bit less owned than those guys and be well leveraged and totally unique. All right, with that in mind, I think I'm going to punch out. It's 11:15. I haven't had dinner. We've been on for 3 hours and 45 minutes. My back is sweating. Joker needs to go out. I can hear him. He's down here licking his paw for the last 10 minutes, by the way. I'm just hearing these slurping sounds from under the desk. You probably can't hear that either. So I'm sitting here just rambling for no good reason now. I could have ended the show 10 minutes ago. But I'm just here hanging out talking to you guys with my stomach rumbling and the dog slurping and now hacking on probably licked hair off of his paw. And now he's hacking up the hair. I got to go. That's it. Good luck out there tomorrow, guys. Probably not going to be around tomorrow. I will get all the updates, all the usual content for the website will be up. The above below article, the updated groups, projections will all be updated. Rankings will all be updated for the morning. So you'll be good to go on that. I will get basketball projections up in the morning. I don't know what the slate looks like at all. I haven't taken a peek at it yet. But then I'm going to be out of the house at the Bad Religion show tomorrow night. So actually, What time does that slate start? My point is there's probably not going to be a lot of updates going through tomorrow. It is a 5-game, 7 o'clock start. Hopefully not a lot of craziness in the basketball one, but don't be looking for me to make too many updates. I'll try and jump on and like throw a note on there to put some relevance around what the projections look like if something goes completely haywire. But you're a little bit on your own tomorrow, boys. All right. With that in mind, good luck out there. Somebody go win something. I'll see you Monday at the latest. Adios, gang. And thanks. Hit the like button. Thank you. You guys rock. See ya.